Crooked Fanny playing dirty tricks in the courtroom. She always picks, bending the rules. She'd know it, but I won't let her get under my skin. Down in Georgia, where the blues run deep, crooked justice, a secret they keep. But I see through her lies, I see the truth. Gonna make her pay for what she do. Fanny's got a reputation to uphold, but her tactics are shady. Story untold, she thinks she's clever, but I'm on to her game. I'll expose her ways and put her to shame.
Hey, oh, folks! Oh, yeah, bit late, but something came up and I needed to handle it. But here I am. Oh, how are you all doing? I hope you, well, are okay after this night's landfall. And it's early morning in the Georgia area, well, on the East Coast. So I hope everybody who went to bed last night woke up this morning. All right. So there is no court today, which means rewind, recap, or however you want to call it. Down there, yeah. And last week I missed out on a couple of days because of work, which means I can go through it. The thing I missed out on, something I looked forward to, was Mr. Sprinkel's testimony, because in the one of the preliminary hearings, but a year and a half ago, he at least sounded honest, and then found out, through other people and watching Cat Not Williams streams, this is not the same. This guy is full of himself. Yes, I have seen videos about Florida and the states north of Florida. And yeah, be safe, folks. Be safe. Please be safe. Don't challenge anything. Okay, but we need to get through this. So this is what we will have a few out. Why are you in my... You have your own seat over here, Mr. Jingles. Yeah, I know, you have to be in my chair. Because I presume because it's my chair. Well, I borrow it from Mr. Jingles. You want to say hi to the audience, Mr. Jingles? Hello. But okay, let's just go through it. Oh, no. For freak's sake. I accidentally pressed the 0, which takes it back to the start. There he is. Now, I presume both him and the microphone are correct sized. Playing in 1.25 speed. So we are back at day 133.
Go ahead, swear. Yeah.
You swear affirm testimony gives the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Let's see. Thanks, Judge, first name.
First name Michael, Michael. Last name Sprinkel, Sprinkel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sprinkle. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Mr. Sprinkle, would you please tell the jury where it is that you work?
I am a deputy district attorney at the office of the Fulton County District Attorney here in Atlanta, Georgia.
And what are your responsibilities as a deputy district attorney here at the Fulton County DA's office?
I am over the unindicted homicide unit. And what this means is that I receive case files from the various police agencies here in Atlanta, and I review these case files, and I prepare the cases for indictment, which basically means I prepare the charging instrument, that being the indictment. And I also make recommendations as to other investigative steps that we might take prior to presenting the case to the grand jury.
All right. Now, when you said all of the investigative agencies here in Atlanta, is that all of Fulton County that you look at cases for?
Yes, more broadly, Fulton County, not just Atlanta.
All right. Now, prior to working, first of all, how long have you worked as a deputy district attorney over the unindicted homicide unit?
Specifically as a deputy, I was promoted to deputy in late 2021. I've worked in essentially the same capacity since October of 2013, meaning that since I've...
Hold on here. Kristen Vasquez, do you know if anyone has talked to Kat? I sent her a message about tonight's or this afternoon's panel show, but I haven't received an answer yet. So no, I haven't seen or talked to Kat yet today. But it's only 8:15 a.m. So we will see when she decides to wake up. Maybe she has a power out. I simply don't know. But she was okay yesterday. So she knows how to take care of herself. I'm sure she's okay.
been in the role wherein I receive case files from the various police agencies in Fulton County and then review them.
Okay. Do you know how many of those case files approximately that you have received since you've been in that role as a unindicted homicide unit and writer? Harold, do you know how many case files you've reviewed since you've been at the DA's office?
Well, over 10 years. I've been doing this over 100. It's going to be over 1,000 case files.
Are all of those homicide case files?
No, they're not all homicide case files.
Now, what other kind of case files then would you have been reviewing?
In my current role?
Yes.
Well, every now and then I'll be assigned some sort of special case or investigation. Off the top of my head, do you want me to get into specifics?
No, I just want you to tell the jury generally what are the types.
I think at one point in the past, I was specially assigned to a case involving the illegal dumping of tires in abandoned lots across Fulton County. There was a terroristic threats case that I dealt with at one point, just cases like that.
All right. Now, when you get a file from a law enforcement agency in Fulton County, is the file always complete to the point that you're satisfied with presenting it to a grand jury?
No, not always. Oftentimes, maybe not more often than not, but so maybe sometimes is a better word. On reviewing the case files, I find that there are deficiencies in the investigation.
All right. So before we go on to those, any deficiencies or anything like that you might find, would you tell the jury, you started out saying that you have been a deputy DA since late 21 and you've been reviewing homicides since 2013. How long have you been at the district attorney's office total?
Since June of 2011.
And what roles have you held there since that time?
So my first role, my first day at the DA's office was June 21st, 2011. And within 2 days of that, I was placed in what was called at the time the complaint room. Mm-hmm. And I worked an overnight shift. Oh, no, it was like a late afternoon shift. It was like 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., I believe were my hours. And I would essentially just sit there and wait for cases to come in from the various police departments in Atlanta, any kind of felony case at all. They would fax us the police reports, et cetera, and I would read over them. I would draft a summary of the case that would be notarized somehow right there in the complaint.
This feels rehearsed because he's saying it too easy.
Room, and this would be provided to a judge at first appearance. And essentially what I did is I would in real time receive the case files, the incident reports essentially from the police officers as they were making the cases.
Okay.
And then I would prepare some preliminary documents to be for first appearance in the morning and then indictment thereafter. I did that for about 3 months, I believe.
Where did you work after that? 2
months, actually. I then was sent to the non-complex trial division.
What does that mean?
Non-complex at that time, and it may be this way at this time too, I don't know, but at that time it was a division within the Fulton County Superior Court that handled or concerned certain felony offenses that were considered lower level in severity than others, such as simple possession of coke.
Your Honor, his background is what I'm establishing, and I'm asking him to just give a brief summary.
All right, well, it's not particularly brief in the summary, so let's get a little bit more brief.
Let's go a little bit more brief. What did you do as a attorney in the non-complex trial division?
I basically just handled the prosecution of lesser felonies like possession of drug and minor theft.
After how long did you stay in the non-complex trial division?
I believe 6 months.
Where did you go after that?
The trial division.
And what did you do briefly in the trial division?
I handled cases, the prosecution of cases such as aggravated assaults, armed robberies, drug trafficking, that sort of thing.
Okay. And how long did you stay in the trial division?
A little less than 2 years.
After that, is that when you were sort of went into a different role?
Yes, that was in October of 2013 when I was assigned to the major case division in the unindicted homicide role, which is essentially the role that I'm in right now.
Okay. Did you supervise people in October 2013?
No, not at that time.
Did you have any other persons working with you, like investigators?
I did. I had an investigator named David White.
All right. When you received a case, you were talking earlier, and actually, let me just back up quickly. Your educational background, just
Well,
majored in.
I majored in public policy at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and I got my law degree from Georgia State University.
Now, have you always only worked as a prosecutor, as a lawyer? Briefly telling the jury whether or not you have.
Your Honor, I'm actually going to object to that as relevant. It's irrelevant.
Overruled.
Since I've been a licensed attorney, no, I worked for King & Spalding briefly as a document review attorney.
Have you ever worked for an attorney that did criminal defense work?
I did, Alan Begner.
How long did you do that?
2007 to 2010, I believe.
Now, coming back to what you currently do, when you say that you receive cases from law enforcement agencies and you review them for deficiencies at times, please explain to the jury what it is that you mean when you say deficient.
Well, I looked through the case file and I just looking at not just from a legal perspective, but a common sense perspective. In my judgment, I believe that perhaps there can be more to prove a case at a forthcoming trial, or there should be things that we should do when, investigative tasks that we should take before we present the case to a grand jury and then proceed to trial.
Does every homicide case that you receive, every unindicted homicide case that you receive, include a suspect that has already been identified or warrants have already been taken out for a suspect? Oh.
Rephrase.
With every homicide case that you receive, have warrants already been taken out for a suspect?
Not every case, usually.
What have subjects or suspects been identified in every homicide case that you receive?
Yes, I would say generally there's at the very least a person of interest.
Okay. Under what circumstances do you receive case files where warrants haven't been taken out?
Well, that could be an instance in which the police feel that they, like I said, have at the very least a person of interest in mind, but they would prefer the DA's office to review the case file prior to them. Generally the procedure is the police go to a magistrate and they swear, they provide some testimony to a judge, and then the judge, on hearing that testimony, decides whether a warrant should issue or not. If a warrant issues, then the person that the officer seeks to charge with the crime is presumably arrested on that warrant thereafter. But sometimes the police may feel it necessary to consult with me prior to doing that. So they'll send me the case file and I'll review it and I'll consult with the police as to what may perhaps they or we can do to improve the case and find more evidence prior to their seeking an arrest warrant or are presenting the case to a grand jury.
Are you a certified law enforcement officer?
I'm not a law enforcement officer.
So what types of things, if you would tell the jury, is it that you are able to do that law enforcement isn't able to do when you get these cases that you feel should have more done?
That calls for speculation.
Why don't you rephrase?
Okay. Would you tell the jury some of the steps that you take to obtain more evidence in the cases you receive when you believe that more evidence could be obtained?
Well, I draft search warrants, which law enforcement officers that work for the DA's office review with me. I already mentioned investigator David White, but there have been others that I've worked with because the DA's office investigators are certified, post-certified law enforcement officers.
Okay.
And they work with me on the cases. And after I review the case file and discuss the case with them, I'll draft the search warrants and I'll go over it with the law enforcement officer with the DA's office, and then they'll present it to a superior court judge. And so these search warrants can be for things like cell phone records, social media accounts, et cetera. I can subpoena things on behalf of the grand jury. Certain records for which finding a probable cause is not a condition precedent to receiving the records, like basic cell phone subscriber and incoming, outgoing call data can be obtained with a subpoena. I can do that. Also, I can also subpoena witnesses to the grand jury, which is something the police can't do.
Do you collaborate with law enforcement officers in further investigating cases in any of the homicide cases that you receive?
Yes.
How is this not bolstering? He just telling the jury, oh, look how awesome I am, or we are. I mean, if this assistant district attorney is so involved in these cases, why aren't he a part of the prosecution's team? No, I believe he is, even though he might not officially be a part of it. That means it should open the door for the defense to call other assistant district attorneys or prosecutors to the stand. Because if they can, if the prosecution can call one of their colleagues an ADA, why shouldn't the defense be able to call?
Do you discuss with them steps that they might take to strengthen or to better investigate their cases?
All the time, yes.
So are they also capable of drafting these search warrants for cell phone records, social media, and all of the things you just testified about to the jury?
Yes, they are.
So why is it that you then would need to be doing these things with files that you receive from a law enforcement agency?
Well, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes after the police make an arrest, they feel like their work is done, essentially. I really don't know how to articulate that any better than I just did. And as a result of that, that is we being myself and the people with whom I work at the DA's office have to take over the investigation and obtain some of these search warrants ourselves.
When you say social media, cell phone records, and all of the other items that you obtain search warrants for, how do you make a determination if the law enforcement agency hasn't already gathered them, where to look and what to get?
Well, there's a lot that I can glean from just reviewing what it is that law enforcement did find. Let's say this is not specific to this case at all. This is just a hypothetical. But let's say I obtain a file from law enforcement, and they did obtain some cell phone records. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just load the records into a spreadsheet, and I'll go through the calls line by line, and I'll see a specific call at a certain time, and I'll think based on some of the information that's contained within the record surrounding that call, or regarding that call, rather, that being the date, time of the call, the tower that was utilized by the handset that was placing the call, and the person that was right. I'll be curious, let's say, regarding the other person that was a party to that call. And I'll think, you know what, this call was placed by this person like 1 minute after the homicide. I don't know who this person is. I need to find out who that person is. That would be something that I would follow up on. Maybe send a subpoena, or depending on some other things that I may have seen in the records, may even rise to the level of probable cause. So I draft a search warrant to get the tower logs related to that other number, something like that.
Would you tell the jury whether or not you have any experience collecting and listening to jail recordings?
Yes, vast experience.
Yes, sir. Pull that microphone down closer
I
to
think
you.
he's talking about.
Now, Mr. Sprinkel is not called as an expert witness, so he really can't talk too much. Oh, look at all my experience. Yar is here. Yar. It sounds like Ms. Love is trying to have him as an expert witness, which no, he is not. Might be experienced, but he is not an expert in that specific area.
Me.
Oh, you're talking about, okay, Miss Love, okay.
Would you tell the jury, just for Mr. Harden, would you tell the jury what experience you have with jail recordings?
Jail recordings are recordings of phone calls placed by inmates at the Fulton County Jail. All calls except for calls made from like contraband cell phones or any other non-regulated phone in the Fulton County Jail are that are placed by inmates or placed from phones that essentially automatically record the phone calls, and the recordings are automatically stored on a server somewhere. Up until very recently, like May of 2024 to be exact, these phones that were in the Fulton County Jail that the inmates would utilize to make these calls were owned and maintained by a company called Securus, Securus. It's now a new company, the name of which I can't recall. But I have access to these jail calls. When it was on Securus, when they're the company that maintained the recordings and the infrastructure that allowed for the recordings, it was there was a website that I log into. commandcenter.securustech.net was the uniform resource locator, or URL. I had a login and password, and on logging in, I would be able to search for the jail calls using various search terms, using the search form that was provided to me, and then I could listen to any call that was placed by an inmate from a phone mounted to the wall or through a tablet. And they were all voice over IP calls that were placed.
How would you decide out of all of the calls that existed at the Fulton County Jail or from the Fulton County Jail, in any particular case, where to start looking for calls of interest?
Well, that is it. There's a lot that goes into that. Okay. So on a typical murder case, I would start with every inmate. Let me back up a little bit. Every inmate is assigned an account number that they have to enter before they place a call from the Fulton County Jail phone. They then have to follow that account number with a PIN. So they type in their account number, they type in their PIN, and then they place a call from the Fulton County Jail, and it debits money from an account that's been set up so they can place calls, because every call costs money. All right. So what I would do is I would first run a list of all phone numbers that the inmate
I'm
call.
going to object based on relevance, based on bolstering. That'll be my objection.
Your Honor, one, this witness will be talking about certain steps that he took to further the particular investigation of the case that we're here on.
Yeah, so ask him those questions. Shouldn't be that hard.
And how he did it and the extent to which he, the steps and the extent to which he went to find certain things are relevant in terms of how exhaustive his efforts were. So it'll allow the jury to gauge.
Why don't you just ask him if his efforts were exhaustive?
Your Honor, I think it's relevant that the jury understand what he did to narrow down those numbers that he.
Okay, well, let's get to that without there being a treatise on all of this.
Okay. All right, Mr. Sprinkel, without the treatise, can you give us or give to the jury a more condensed version of how you determine what calls you want to look at out of the thousands of calls that exist?
Sure. I basically just compile a list of phone numbers that the inmate called, and then I run each phone number individually, and I look at the date and time that the inmate called the numbers, and based on when that call was placed in temporal proximity to something that I deem significant, I listen to that call, and on listening to it, I determine whether or not it was relevant.
And when you say you run each call individually, what does that mean with the Securus system?
You can search for calls based on phone number only. So you can, in the search field in this form at that website that I said that I log into, You can just type in a phone number and a date range and ask the system to return all calls placed to a certain number by any inmate in the entire facility for a certain time period.
Are inmate names always associated with the PIN number, or inmate calls rather, please forgive me? Is a call by an inmate always associated with the PIN number that inmate has been assigned?
No, not at all. It's very common for inmates to utilize each other's accounts, rather, to place calls.
What about when a person is first booked into the jail? Is there an account or a PIN number associated with that person?
No, those calls placed in the booking area, they are not required, nor do they have an account and PIN number to even utilize to make the call. So those calls, they don't need to enter any account information. So the only way you can find calls from the booking area or the lobby area, but you're relevant to your question, the booking area, when the inmates first get there, is to search by the phone number specifically.
Okay. Now, do you listen to, when you say that all the calls are recorded, do you go and listen to calls between inmates and their attorneys, things that are privileged?
No, and ideally, the attorney will have registered their number with the system such that the calls aren't recorded at all. But if I receive,
Not relevant and is bolstered.
Overruled.
Please go ahead.
yeah, and if I do see calls from attorneys, then I just don't listen to them, and I just disregard those.
Okay. You mentioned contraband cell phones. Would you explain when you said that except for contraband cell phones, you try to listen to the calls that are made from the jail?
Well, I can't listen to phone calls made from cell phones that have been smuggled into the jail and the inmates are using unlawfully, because those calls are obviously not recorded. But yeah, I mean, there's cell phone calls. Unless there's a wiretap on the phone, I wouldn't be able to listen to those.
We'll come back to the wiretap, but do you ever have access to calls or cell phones rather that were smuggled into the jail and used illegally?
Occasionally.
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled.
Occasionally, yes, there will be cell phones that are seized from inmates at the Fulton County Jail, and the contents of them are digitally forensically extracted, and I will review those, yes.
When you're talking about them being digitally forensically extracted, could you break that down in lay terms?
So, sure, a cell phone, as I think we all know, has a port on it, generally that you plug a charging cable into to charge it, but also with most, if not all, modern cell phones at this point, that cable can also allow for the transmission and of data to and from the phone. And so when a phone is seized by law enforcement, there's certain software that law enforcement can use to basically plug the phone up to the computer using that same port that can send and receive data. And this software can make an exact copy of the contents of the phone. It's called a forensic data extraction of the phone. It creates a forensic image, digital image of the phone. And it's meant to ensure that the contents of the phone are not altered at all in this process. And it allows, through the specialized software that law enforcement utilizes, to read the forensic image that is created from this process to inspect the contents of the phone, such as the text messages, images, videos that were filmed and photographed by the phone, et cetera.
Can you do or find social media content on those extractions as well?
You can. There's subsections of the reports. One of those is or not just Instagram, but social media accounts that are registered to various apps in the phone. So yes, those are in there as well.
And do you ever use those extractions to aid in furthering an investigation into the homicides that you receive?
Yes.
How do you decide what or how to find social media accounts of interest when you're investigating unindicted homicide cases?
Well, there's a lot that goes into that. Are you saying if I were to have a person of interest or anyone really, and I just wanted to find their social media accounts?
Yes. How do you go about determining what social media platforms and to whom or how a person identifies themselves on social media platforms that you find of evidentiary value?
Well, that can be difficult or easy depending on the person. I suppose I would start by just searching for their name on a social media platform. If they have a very uncommon name, then it can be very easy to find them. But if they have a very common name, they can be a little bit more difficult.
Do you use things like phone numbers, or do you use things like phone numbers to narrow that down?
Yeah. So there was a time where if you had someone's cell phone number and you ran it through Facebook in the search field, it would actually just return their Facebook profile. Facebook doesn't do that anymore. So that you're right. That was one method. Most social media platforms today, I'm not aware of any that allow you to find, except for Cash App, which I wouldn't really consider a social media platform. But things such as like Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok, et cetera, I'm not aware of any of those that allow you to search by phone number now.
Do you conduct interviews with your investigators to further any investigation of the homicide cases you received?
Yes, and by that, I mean, my investigator and I will just go visit people at their homes or their places of business, and we'll interview them and ask them questions that we may have about the case.
And when you do that, do you write up a report, or do you in any way include or somehow memorialize that interview?
So there's a couple of things I do. I'll audio record the interviews, and I will generally write a report summarizing the contents of the interview as well.
Do you end up indicting every suspect that has been arrested or for whom?
Objection as to relevance.
Overruled. Do you end up indicting or presenting to the grand jury every suspect that has been identified or arrested in the homicide cases that you received?
No.
And why is that?
Well, there are times then when on reviewing the case file and
Bolstering.
Y'all want to approach?
And as I said yesterday, I might have missed a few of these. It is now sidebar counter 270. And hello, Polly. Hello, everybody. If I haven't mentioned it yet, hello. Yeah, as the defense attorney says, this is pure bolstering. Oh, no, stop doing that.
And see y'all in the morning. Same instructions that y'all have been under for the entire class.
And then they were sent home. Let's see what happened on the end of day 133. Then we can move on to day 134.
With everybody here, if you want to give, I don't know where that noise is coming from. A little instruction to Mr. Sprinkle is to.
Okay, yes, Your Honor, I will try to tailor the questions that I ask so that the responses are as focused as we can be, while at the same time allowing the jury to understand and gauge how it is that Deputy DA Sprinkle goes about making decisions in his cases in general, and specifically how and why he did what he did.
Oh, yeah, I remember this, where Ms. Love actually suggested at one point that calling Ashley Merchant might be an avenue. And my immediate thought was, oh, please do. Please do. Ms. Love, call Ashley Merchant to the stand. Please do.
In this case, and how it is consistent with the way that he conducts himself.
Okay, and I mean, essentially, you're a lawyer, so it's easy enough to just tell you this. What we want to avoid is improper bolstering. All right, so just keep that in mind as you're testifying. And obviously, answer the questions that any attorney asks you, but.
And beyond that, with respect to what was discussed at the bench, Your Honor, I'd like the opportunity to.
Sure. So we're going to excuse you for the day, Mr. Sprinkle, and 9 o'clock for you. And of course, if we end up with a different witness, then it won't be 9 o'clock for you, but be prepared to be over here ready to testify at 9.
Your Honor,
Yes, Your Honor.
before Mr. Sprinkle leaves, I would just ask that you order that no lawyers
Be-
discuss
beyond-
these
yes.
matters with Mr. Sprinkle now that he's sworn in as a witness.
Okay, well, I hope everybody knows that that's not appropriate anyway when somebody's in the middle of testifying. So if you need to talk to him about another case, fine, but nobody be talking to Mr. Sprinkle about his ongoing testimony while he's still on the stand.
Your Honor, I believe that the prohibition that Mr. Shard is referring to is akin to the rule of sequestration and talking to him about what he has already talked about. I would ask that the court allow me to continue to speak with Deputy DA Sprinkle. He is our witness and he's not, nobody else is. I mean, I know not to
sworn
talk to
in.
him about other people's testimony, but talking to him about things that I'm going to be.
No, in my opinion, the moment a witness is sworn in is the moment everybody stops talking to him about this case.
Showing or saying or whatever to him.
Now, I know that's not the
know that
rule
there's
everywhere,
any legal
but-
prohibition against that and constraining us from interacting with our witness. He hasn't even been subjected to cross, so we're not trying to tell him what to say, but at this point, there's no difference in terms of his, anything that could be done improperly than there was before he was sworn. So I would ask that the court allow us, and if anyone else wants to talk to him, allow them to talk to him as well. There's nothing that can be, the rule of sequestration isn't going to be, is it violated? So there's not a prohibition against us talking to our witness or any other as
I mean, honestly, I think the rule is actually something like, overnight it's okay. Something at lunchtime isn't. But essentially you shouldn't, and he's a lawyer again, but you shouldn't be in the middle of testimony trying to coach him about anything, which and you won't be doing.
Right. But speaking to him about or asking him about or showing him evidence that we're going to be doing, or we have, like I said, there's nothing to coach him about. I've just started on the examination and I don't have any opposition to anybody speaking to him. I don't know if they've done it or not, but there's nothing improper that could be even done at this point with this witness, just because he has started his testimony. And I would ask that the court allow us to continue to work with and talk with our witness.
And I would object to that. He's on the witness stand, he's sworn. That's every opportunity to talk to the witness about his ongoing testimony. If you hadn't talked to him about what you're going to show him before now, it's too damn late, number one.
All right, Mr. Harvey, you keep talking.
Oh, Mr. Harvey. Yeah, Mr. Harvey's fed up. Really fed up with this.
To opposing counsel, and as you know, practicing law for as long as you have, you're supposed to talk through the court. Okay, so can you please
Sure.
try to do that?
Sure, there's
Thank you.
every opportunity. You should have taken the opportunity to talk about his testimony before he got on the witness stand. He's a sworn witness now. And the case is Perry versus Leak. It's a United States Supreme Court case in which the government said that a defendant's lawyer can't talk to his own client overnight because it was improper to talk to a witness while the witness was on the witness stand. And the US Supreme Court said, yeah, that's the rule, except for the Sixth Amendment allows a defense lawyer to talk to his own client overnight. So I object to the state or anybody for the state talking to this witness or any witness while they are on the witness stand and testifying.
All right, so I don't think that the case actually limited it just to defense attorneys and defense counsel. That was the reasoning in that case. But, Ms. Love, I mean, be aware that if you talk to him about something overnight, they're going to get up on cross and ask exactly what y'all talked about.
That's fine. And I understand that. And Your Honor, that's fine. And if there's additional case law on any of this, I know that in the morning we're going to be bringing up, we're going to be briefing the court on some other things.
Okay.
I'll bring it to the courts.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sprinkle. That actually reminds me. So when Ms. Smith was on the stand, and I may have heard it wrong, but I think that she said that, of course I know this because the trial's been on, live stream. Can everybody please tell or remind anybody that you think might be a witness in this trial to not be watching the live stream before they have testified, to not talk to any witness who has already testified about their testimony, and to not, once they themselves have testified, talk to any other potential witness about what they testified to. Y'all all know that, but not every lay person knows that. So just remind all of your potential witnesses not to be doing that.
Your Honor, I just want to point out that we beg, we admonish, all of that. And I've heard people say, it's everywhere. What am I supposed to? I'm like, turn it off.
Correct.
But,
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying to the extent y'all can try to control that, please do. All right. What else do we need to handle tonight? Or can,
oh, yes, I'm sorry.
yeah, you're out of here. Thank you for the day.
And so, Judge, there was one other, well, I don't think there's anything I can do about it though. Now I'm just going to have to check on the status of our witness who's currently
Okay.
at Grady. But I mean, I think that I'm not going to speak for the doctor, but there may be a point at which we present something else to the court regarding finding out with more certainty about his.
Y'all are
condition.
welcome to do that at any time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I
Your Honor,
wish
Yes.
I knew
Can I,
still
and I
get-
could email it
Which
to
one
everyone
you-
as well, but I have a couple of cases I'd like you to consider so
All
we
right.
can just start running in the morning. Vega, VEGA versus State. It's 285 Georgia, 32. It's in Division 3. It's a 2009 case. The cases it relies upon are still cited in
I'm going to
2023.
Make some coffee.
And
I'll be
it
right back.
specifically what we're targeting is where the conduct and the motives of the actor are not matters concerning which the truth must be found, i.e. are irrelevant to the issues on trial, then the information, etc., on which he or she acted shall not be admissible. Only in rare instances will the conduct of an investigating officer need to be explained.
Hang on
Otherwise,
just a second.
of course.
Sorry. Have the deputy going in and out of the jury room, and it looks like some of them are still in there. Go ahead.
Only in rare instances will the conduct of an investigating officer need to be explained. Otherwise, it is error to permit an investigating officer to testify under the guise of explaining the officer's conduct to what other persons related to the officer during the investigation. The mere circumstance of an officer's initiation and continuation of an investigation without more is not relevant to the inquiry. And the reason, there's also Leslie, by the way, LESLIE versus State. That's 355 Georgia Appeal 244. 355 Georgia Appeal 244. It's in Division 7. It's a 2020 case. It says the exact same thing. But-
Yeah, and my understanding of those cases, and it used to be, especially before our new evidence code, that, every time there's a hearsay objection when there was an officer on the stand was, oh, it's to explain his conduct, and that's hardly ever relevant. This is A, not just an investigating officer, but B, if Ms. Love, I know you had said some things up at the bench that I think are relevant in responding to this issue of whether, I don't know if it's so much his conduct, but I'm sorry. The practice that he goes about in deciding to sometimes not, I guess, bring an indictment against somebody that had been arrested.
Yes, the decision, the way that he does his job. I mean, yes.
I just want the court to appreciate this thing. Then are we allowed to bring in people who've been exonerated by DNA from the Fulton County District Attorney's Office under Michael Sprinkel murder case that has been found to be innocent? Do we get to bring in individual people who say that they were wrongly charged and their murder case after indictment was dismissed? Do we get to bring in people who have pled guilty, but will explain, I only pled guilty even though I'm innocent? Because this is just opening up, to me, the DA's office reputation. I could put my reputation in this courtroom as well. I could have a lot of people come in and say, I believe beautiful things, but we don't do that. And that's,
Which is why, as you know, up at the bench, I instructed Ms. Love to focus and tailor her questioning so that it focuses on what he did in this case.
okay. I thought we were still talking about general. Okay. And I agree with you. Whatever he did in this case may or may not be relevant, but right now he's talking about, I don't indict everybody that's brought to me. Sometimes law enforcement doesn't do a good job, so I have to pick up the pieces. I don't see why that would do it.
I don't know why Ms. Love asked that question anyway, but I mean, it's Ms. Love's case. Well, it's the state's case being led by Ms. Love. But one thing that I think this is not the typical case in that the defense actually in this case has a couple of people, I think, who were once indicted for the murder of Mr. Thomas, who no longer are. And we have this other set of people now indicted. And there has been very much suggestion through defense questioning of witnesses thus far. And I don't know, I suspect will be in opening and closing as well, which is entirely appropriate. as a defense counsel to do, but to poke holes in the state's case by saying, you know, these people, law enforcement thought it was them, XYZ, and all of a sudden, you know, it's not. So y'all actually have somebody you're pointing to and saying, this is who ought to be being prosecuted, but they're not. And it's because of, I don't know, whatever reasons y'all come up with to argue. But that, I think, takes it out of the general, well, conduct's never relevant, because neither side should be hamstrung in not being able to counter what the one side is saying about the case. So. Anything else?
If it's tailored, then we can do it
Yeah.
question by question, but right now it's very broad.
Yeah, I agree. And I do not want Mr. Sprinkle sitting up here saying, you know, hey, I'm brilliant. And when I decide, you know, somebody should be prosecuted, it's because I know, or obviously he's not going to do that, but anything like that, because his thoughts about it aren't really relevant.
And Your Honor, that is the point that I was actually trying to stay very narrowly focused on, because it's not about his thoughts, but there has been a persistent assertion by way of cross-examination and whatnot regarding it. I won't say impugning, but it kind of is why certain decisions were made. There have been questions posed that have been.
Yes, questions were posed against the witnesses you have put up so far, which are these investigators whose reports mysteriously went missing. Now, something I'm wondering here is, if Mr. Sprinkle took over the investigation, why don't he have those reports? Ms. Love, why doesn't Mr. Sprinkle have all the missing reports? Since, according to you yourself, he got it from the investigators. Isn't that strange?
Been stricken that have amounted to they were just after this person, or you ignored this person. And even when we have witnesses that have testified and, you know, backed up and been given immunity and said certain things, the suggestion has been made that they were given immunity because, you know, the state only wanted to go after X, Y, or Z. And I believe that it is very relevant and important for the jury to be able to gauge what at least was done in this case. And it's not just the decision of the DA's office. This is a person who actually took steps that were of an investigative nature. It is important that they are able to gauge that what has happened here in the context of, and I said it at the bench, what he does with each case. This is not no different. And we did say that we were going to tailor it, and we're going to do exactly as the court allowed, go narrower, and then talk specifically after that, after narrowing it down, you know, generally, is this what you do in each of your cases? So I believe that the court is actually absolutely correct. It would be hamstringing the state's ability to put what this person has done in the context of what they do each time, and then have the defense say, you know, well, he just went this extra mile because he was trying to find information. He went looking for these jail calls. He did all this work because he wanted to find something on this person, versus this is just how he treats an unindicted case. And I would like to, of course, present more case law on bolstering, as the court said that we could in the morning, to argue the point.
Your Honor, can I just invite the court to observe that, to the extent that the court has been listening to the cross-examination, how we've been not presenting our case, it's not our case.
Right.
Our defense is that any challenges to the credibility of the investigation or the investigators has always been in the context of this case. Right? It's just been challenging what was done in this case, or what was not done in this case. And so we've been narrowly focused on defending the allegations and the investigation of what we thought were improper investigations, or targeting wrong people, or targeting certain people. So I think that's relevant. And what Mr. Sprinkle did in investigating this case, assisting the police in this case, sure, that may, like Mr. Steele said, may or may not be relevant. Right? But for him, again, I don't want to repeat everything that's been said already, but to have him go on and talk about, well, you know, in this case, hypothetically, I may do this because this is why, and, you know, for him to go into explaining about the secure system, and, you know, this is what inmates do when they get to the jail, when they're down in booking versus elsewhere, all of that is really not necessary for the jury's consideration. It's just not relevant. And for him to talk about other cases really would be improper bolstering. He's bolstering himself. He's bolstering either the work of the DA's office or investigators, and that's just not proper, unless he's talking about what was done in this case.
All right, yes, thank you. I will keep all of that in mind. All right, I will see y'all at, I mean, do we even think 8:45 is going to give us enough time? Let's meet at 8:30.
Yeah. All right. That was day 133 at the end of it with Mr. Sprinkel on the stand. Let's see if Mr. Sprinkel decides on day 134 that he will do better. I just have to find it. Oh, not that one. Is that this one? No.
DA's office or investigators, and that's just not.
Oh, that was that one again. There it is. Dun dun dun. Doom. Speed ahead.
We have the rest of the attorneys in the conference room, or do we know? Ah, okay, there's one for everybody. That works. All right, Ms. Love, what do we know about witnesses for today?
So Judge, we have Mr. Sprinkel. We will be presenting an order or a motion for an order, a proposed order for the court to hear from the staff at Grady about Mr. Zachary. We don't know how the court will handle that, but we'll move
Okay,
because we don't yet have his stat. We have word from the sheriff's office about his status. But the captain was speaking to a charge nurse and looking at what was available, it was not evident to the person I was speaking with what was keeping him. So I will be attempting to have his treating physician, perhaps.
All right. I see in the chat about Nathan Wade. And according to Phil Holloway, he's been found and subpoenaed. So let's see if let's read about Nathan Wade finally being subpoenaed after being missing in action for a number of days where nobody found him. Congress of the United States House of Representatives Committee on the Judiciary. So this is not the Georgia Senate, it's the actual Congress of the United States who want to know where the federal funds that was given to Fonnie Willis, where that ended up. Well, if you've been here before, we already know, and I have the photos to prove it. All right, let's read. Dear Mr. Wade, the Committee on the Judiciary continues to conduct oversight of politically motivated prosecutions by state and local officials, as well as the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, receipt and use of federal grant funds. As part of our oversight on May 9th, 2024, the committee requested that you appear for a transcribed interview relating to your work for the Fulton County, blah, blah, blah. To date, you have failed to honor our request. So from May 9th until yesterday, that would be almost 5 months. You have ignored them. Despite the committee making numerous efforts over the course of many months to obtain your voluntary cooperation, as such, the committee must resort to compulsory process to obtain your testimony. After 2 months of communications following our May 9th letter between your counsel and committee staff, your counsel informed the committee on July 19th that you agreed to appear voluntarily for a transcribed interview on September 18th, 2024. That was 9 days ago. In the week preceding the scheduled interview, the committee contacted your counsel twice via email and did not receive a response. Instead, on September 13th, just 5 days before your scheduled interview, your counsel informed the committee that due to an unsolicited letter from Roy Barnes, counsel to Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis, you had to postpone your appearance. Notably, your counsel offered the committee no alternative date for your testimony. Finally, on September 17th, your counsel confirmed that you would not appear for your scheduled interview based on quote-unquote concerns raised by the Barnes letter. The 11th hour intervention from District Attorney Willis does not excuse your failure to appear for your transcribed interview. As an initial matter, it is not entirely clear whether Mr. Barnes represents District Attorney Willis in her individual capacity or in her capacity as the DA for Fulton County, your former employer. In his letter to you, Mr. Barnes represents his quote-unquote client as DA Willis and identifies himself as, quote, counsel for Fannie Willis, DA of Fulton County. Press reports and public accounts indicate that Ms. Willis retained Mr. Barnes to defend her in a Georgia State Senate proceeding relating to Ms. Willis' political prosecution of former president. As such, it is not readily apparent that Mr. Barnes represents the Fulton County. However, even if Mr. Barnes is authorized to represent the institutional interest of the Fulton County, the concerns he articulated are baseless, unpersuasive, and have already been rejected by a federal court in a similar case. In his letter to you, Mr. Barnes stated that the Fulton County would, quote, demand to have a representative present at any interview so that Ms. Willis may assert any necessary privilege objections to the committee's question. In support of this position, Mr. Barnes stated that the Fulton County is entitled to such an accommodation because the, quote, procedure was recently followed in Bragg v. Jordan. However, Mr. Barnes misunderstands the Bragg litigation and the circumstances concerning the deposition of Mark Pomerantz, the former special prosecutor of the New York County District Attorney's Office. Danny. Wasn't it more? Okay, we only had that first page, apparently. So, yeah, well, he has now been subpoenaed. All right, let's get back to our trial.
We can get that done, address the matter, and whether or not he's able to safely either come testify or be released. The reason I say that is that when he first was taken into custody, he was taken down to Grady and released. And when he was set, it was in 2 days' time, and then he was set to come here, obviously, but then he was taken back right before, and they kept him because of that. So given the set of circumstances that we have, we'll be asking the court to seek from Grady itself.
We all know what happened to Mr. Zachary, and now he's finally off the stand. We know all about that. So let's get back to Mr. Sprinkel.
Present to the jury.
All right, well, I gave instructions just for,
And he's back on the stand with a color-matched tie.
Good morning, CDA Sprinkle.
Good morning.
When we broke on yesterday, I believe that the last question that I asked you was how it was that you went about targeting what phone numbers, for instance, to listen to when you are investigating or conducting an independent investigation of unindicted cases that you receive from law enforcement. Would you explain to the jury how you go about doing that?
Well,
I think he already answered that question yesterday.
I think that there was the objection at the end of the day. So I think that was, he had not completed his response.
Move along, Ms.
My understanding
Lord.
is that he did, and so I'm going to object on asked and answered.
Your Honor,
Sustained.
Mr. Sprinkle, where is it that you get the information from regarding what numbers to look for in Securus as you began to look into how to make your decisions in investigating independently cases that you receive?
well, there's a few areas. The first is looking at the numbers that the inmate called and running each number individually to see which numbers the inmate actually called versus which numbers another inmate called using that inmate's pen. That's the primary way.
If you slow down just a little bit,
All right.
go ahead.
But the other way is I would, if I had, for example, from intelligence that's gathered during the investigation, for example, if cell phone records were obtained by the investigator or by me, however they were obtained, I'll go through, for one of the parties involved in the case, I'll go through them and I'll generate a list of phone numbers from those phone records. And what I'm trying to do there is on every phone number that occurs in a party of interest phone records through the jail call system. Because I'm not oftentimes just looking for phone calls from people that have been actually charged with the crime. I'm also looking for phone calls from people that may know something about the crime and that those phone calls are placed to those people in close temporal proximity to the homicide or
Morning, Dave.
event that I'm interested in.
And how, when you speak about the fact that there are some calls that are made off pin and some calls that are not, how
My coffee is ready. I'll be right back.
do you determine when a call is made by a person that you are actually seeking to gain information from?
There's a number of factors that go into that. One of the most basic and easiest to explain would be I just recognize the voice. If we're talking about the inmate, like if I want to verify that it is in fact an inmate that I'm interested in that's placing the call, then I just develop a familiarity with their voice through various means. Wherever I can find a known exemplar of their voice, then I listen to that and I learn their accent and the tone and tenor of their voice. And that based on a few other things, like, for example, how often the inmate customarily calls this number. If I know that that number belongs to somebody that's a close family member or friend of the inmate, then that's another thing that is kind of an indicia of reliability that is, in fact, the inmate that's calling that number. But I think the primary thing is just knowing their voice.
Is it a common practice to, once you have done these things that you've described for the jury, for you to then talk to people that have not been identified?
I couldn't hear what you said, Cheryl, but saying something at the same time. Objection, what?
Leading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Is it a common practice for you, once you have done all these things that you have described for the jury, for you to talk to people or endeavor to talk to people that have not previously been a part of the case file?
Yes.
Now, when you do that, is that something you do alone, or do you do it with the lead detective or your investigator, or a combination?
A combination.
Okay.
Do you read those reports and save those reports, Mr. Sprinkle? Because this case, the former investigators, their reports seem to have gone missing, but surely you have access to them, don't you, Mrs. Sprinkle?
How often is it that you have actually found people that you had not previously identified as a part of the case file, that were people you sought to obtain information from to further investigate a case?
I'm going to object.
How
That's
often?
irrelevant, Your Honor.
Sustained.
When you actually do locate a person and go and talk to them, do you put that in some kind of memorandum or recording that you preserve to provide to the defense?
Generally, if not invariably and always, I at the very least record the interview unless it had occurred in such a circumstance where that was not possible, such as at random and it was unplanned. But if it's an interview where that I'm actually planning, then I would audio record the interview. Unless I don't believe I've ever actually had an occasion where the audio recorder failed. So I wouldn't even say barring the unforeseen, like the audio recorder failing. So yes, I would always record it.
And do you also provide supplements to the case file that you receive from the police?
Yeah, not in every case, but particularly if it was a case in which I did a lot of extra investigation, then I would write a supplement usually.
I don't think you're wrong,
When do
Wendell
you
Taylor.
do what you just described or called extra investigation? In what circumstances would you do what you call extra investigation?
Well, if it was
And you can explain to me.
in my estimation, if the case needed more investigation, if it needed extra investigation, if after reviewing the case file, I found that the evidence was lacking and that it wouldn't be appropriate to present the case to a grand jury, let alone take it to trial, then I will conduct a quote unquote extra investigation, as I called it, hoping to find more evidence to make the case better or otherwise dispose of the case appropriately.
Now, let me ask you this. What about people that have already been interviewed by law enforcement? Do you ever go out and interview those persons after receiving the case file?
Your Honor, I'm going to object again as to relevance.
Let's go ahead and move on to more targeted questions.
When you receive a statement of a purported witness in a case, do you take the statement given to you in the case file as all that witness has to say, or do you ever endeavor to
I'm
go
gonna
speak
object
with
to
them
leading, Your
yourself?
Sustained.
Ms. Love can't help herself. She really can't help herself. The objection is sustained, and she just keeps going. She knows she's not supposed to, but she can't help herself. And it seems like Mr. Sprinkel is of the same mold. He can't help himself.
Do you do anything with the witness statements that you receive in your unindicted cases that you get from law enforcement?
Objection, relevance.
Your Honor, that goes directly to his practice, his way of conducting investigations into the cases that.
Ask him about this case. That is what the judge has been trying to tell you. Ask him about this case. What he does in other cases have no bearing on what he actually did in this case.
That he then makes other decisions for, and it goes to how it allows the jury to gauge his practice, his.
Counsel approach, please.
Yeah, speaking objections while she's testifying. Yeah, annoying. And we are getting caught up in the sidebar counter. Sidebar counter! Number 271. Mwah, mwah. Oh. And lengthy sidebar again.
DDA Sprinkel. Did you work with Detective Thorpe on the case involving the murder of Donovan Thomas Jr.?
I did.
And in working with Detective Thorpe, do you recall when it was that you received the police file from the Atlanta Police Department?
It would have been late 2015 or in early 2016.
Did you document when you received the case file from Detective Thorpe in a memorandum or report that you provided as part of the case file?
Yeah, it'd probably be this report.
Don't hold it up, don't hold it up.
Well, anyway, this report right here that I brought to the stand, the 140-page one.
140 pages?
Yeah, I believe that's how many pages it is.
Okay.
Yep, 140 pages.
And did you, would you look at that if you need to refresh your memory about when it was that you received the case file from the Atlanta Police Department?
Yeah, right here, in fact, January 2016, it's the first 4 words of the report.
All right. Once you received the case file from Detective Thorpe, without going into what was said by this person.
Okay. Now, Detective Thorpe's report, I believe they did have, because he was reading from it line by line.
Did you notice a witness or identify a witness that you wanted to speak with further?
I did.
Who was that person?
Spencer Wright, AKA Nicholas Robinson.
All right. Now, Spencer Wright or Nicholas Robinson, first of all, why are you saying AKA Nicholas Robinson?
Because
Intelligent.
that was a name he provided contemporaneously with an October or a September 2015 arrest, I believe,
Of himself or someone else?
of himself.
All right. And is that person a person who had a statement already inside the case file you received from the Atlanta Police Department?
He did.
So if there was a statement by that person already inside the case file, why did you want to speak with that person? Or did you want to speak with that person again?
I followed questions.
Say that again?
I had more questions, follow-up questions, other questions that after reviewing the case file that I had that hadn't been previously asked by the Atlanta Police Department.
And is it common when you have questions that haven't been answered in your regular course of reviewing cases to locate those persons, to ask them more questions?
Yes.
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
How did you locate Spencer Robinson, AKA Nicholas Wright?
Spencer Wright was
Spencer Wright, AKA Nicholas Wright.
Spencer Wright was an inmate at the Atlanta City Jail, located next door to the public safety headquarters at 226 Peachtree Street, which is like 2 blocks away.
How did you find out that that's where he was?
Well, I don't recall exactly. I knew that that's where they housed him after he was arrested in October of 2015. Somebody told me, I'm sure that that's where he was, or my investigator found that's where he was. At any rate, that's where he was when I wanted to interview him.
Now, at the time that you received the case file from Detective Thorpe, had
All right. On the way back from court Wednesday, the transport was hit by another car. The car's driver was sighted on scene. The people in the car, in the transport, had been, T-boned, have been, as far as I know, been medically cleared and returned to jail. That is the information, at least from what I've seen from, at least Doug mentioned it and others have mentioned it too over at X. Hopefully they are all right.
Had there been arrest warrants taken out for individuals?
Yes.
Who were the arrest warrants taken out for at the time that you received the case file?
Kenneth Copeland, Antonio Sledge, Demiki and Garlington, and Shannon Jackson.
Shannon Jackson, does he have any other name?
Shannon Stillwell.
And when you received the case file, did the case file have in it more than a written report? In other words, did it consist of audio interviews, surveillance, anything like that?
Did have surveillance video, had a written report drafted by the lead detective, among other things. But the key things were the written report drafted by Detective Jim Thorpe Jr. of the Atlanta Police Department, the surveillance video that depicted the incident, another surveillance video from a gas station. I believe I had that in the initial case file as well. Some crime scene photos, I believe, may have been in there. Although I do recall obtaining more some point later. But and audio from interviews, some cell phone records. I don't recall every single thing that I had. I didn't obtain the entire case file immediately because I recall throughout the course of my work on this case, consulting with other investigators at APD and obtaining little pieces of the case file as I went along. But yeah.
All right. So would you back up, and I'll use one of my colleagues' words, and unpack what you just said a little bit for the jury?
Regarding the murder of Donovan Thomas, I had audio interviews from some of the people that, if not all of them, that Detective Thorpe interviewed as part of his investigation and his report, and surveillance video.
All right. And so slowing down a little bit, you said you did not have all of the case file, that you got other information from other investigators?
Well, I guess that's how you define case file. I had what Detective Thorpe provided me,
Okay.
but there were other investigators at APD that had been working on this matter. And so
And were those other investigators, the information you sought to get from them, were they not in or part of the file Detective Thorpe gave to you?
right, I remember in particular, there was a lot of cell phone records that I obtained from another investigator that I did not obtain from Detective Thorpe. And I did specifically when I say another investigator, I'm talking about Tyrone Dennis.
Okay. Now, if you would, slow it down a little bit more. If you would, please tell the jury how you determined that Detective Dennis had information of interest to you in this case.
Well, I met with Detective Dennis sometime in, I believe it would have been January 2016, sometime in early 2016.
Did you meet with him with Detective Thorpe?
No, I believe it was Detective Dennis and Lakia Gaither, and I met them at the Atlantic Police Department's Public Safety Headquarters in a large conference room.
Okay, pause. So when you first got this particular case with the individuals listed that you just named for whom warrants had been taken out, did you follow the same procedure that you described yesterday for the jury to gain additional information in
Yes,
order to assess the case?
yes.
Was there anything that you knew personally about any of the people for whom warrants had been taken that made you decide to go out and seek additional information in this case?
Are you asking me, do I personally know the defendants, the people that the police charged?
Yes.
No, I did not know them.
Did you know when you got the case file when it was that Detective Thorpe had talked to Spencer Wright?
It would have been in October of 2015 on the night of his arrest.
And did you have, as part of your case file, information that immediately after talking to Spencer Wright or Nicholas Robinson, that Detective Thorpe took out the warrants for the persons you just named? So
Spencer Wright was arrested on October 19, 2015, the same being the night that Detective Thorpe, among others, interviewed him. And the warrants, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, were taken out October 20th, 2015. For the 4 defendants that I referenced earlier for the murder charges.
Where did you have surveillance video from in the file that Detective Thorpe gave you?
So there was a from what I recall, 2 surveillance cameras mounted on the barbershop located at 330 McDaniel Street. And then you went about maybe 100, maybe not even 100 yards away. There's a gravel lot and then a street. There's a Texaco station, McDaniel Northside Drive. And I had surveillance images from that station.
Were you personally familiar with that location? Have you gone out and personally seen it?
Yes, I've been to that location before, yes.
After you got Detective Thorpe's file, did you find yourself out there again, or did you go use what you had to make any kind of determinations?
Yeah.
A reminder, this is a recap from day 134. I haven't seen Mr. Sprinkel's testimony, but since they are talking about reports, and I repeat myself, I hope when it's time for cross-examination, because I don't think he's finished with direct examination, that the first question from the defense, one of the first, is you got all the information from the investigators, correct? Yes. Can you please show us the reports? But because I assume he kept copies for his own.
I drove by there a couple of times, a few times, as I looked over the case just to get the lay of the land, because you can only see so much from Google Earth.
All right, so backing up, when you say you drove by there a couple of times, did you just like drive down the street, or did you stop? What did you do?
I drove down the street, I would stop, and I would just take a look at the lot just to get a kind of, rather than the 2D perspective that you would get on, like I said, Google Earth. I wanted to just kind of see where all the buildings were situated and that kind of thing. I mean, I didn't get out and like linger around, get out of my car and like linger around or anything like that. I didn't really see any reason to do that. But yeah, I did like survey the crime scene.
Why did you do that? Why did you go out there if you already had the surveillance footage?
Again, because it's one thing to look at a scene on a screen where you can get some 3-dimensional perspective from the images. It's quite another to actually be at the scene and not be staring at it in 2 dimensions from a computer screen. Now you get to see, where somebody's view would be obstructed depending on where they were standing and that kind of thing.
Okay. Is that the only thing that you get of value by going out to a scene after you get a police file? Like,
Yeah.
Where somebody's view would be obstructed. You're allowed to tell the jury what value you gain from going out to the scene.
Well, I mean, it's just important to see where the crime actually occurred. Sometimes, particularly if it's like in an apartment complex, going out to the scene, you can do a witness canvas, start knocking on doors.
Did you do that? Have you done that?
I have. I didn't do it in this case because this occurred on a public thoroughfare.
Okay.
But yeah, anywhere.
You didn't do this in this case because it was in the projects, Munchkin? Is that why you didn't do the door-to-door?
Where there's a homicide, where there's a lot of people, like pretty much an apartment complex or a neighborhood, I found that can be beneficial.
All right. Did you also mention Google Earth earlier?
I did.
Why did you mention Google Earth?
Well, Google Earth, in this specific case, I went to Google Earth because I did eventually end up interviewing Spencer Wright myself.
Without talking about what he said.
Right. And right. Well, I'm not even going to get into what he said. I just went to Google Earth to create, to take still shots of images that were photographed by those Google Earth vehicles, I guess, just so I could show them to him and say, okay, well, where were you at this time when you said you saw this, et cetera.
And had he said those things previously in his interview with Detective Thorpe? Had he given the information of where you were at this particular time? Without saying where he was, had he given that?
He offered a verbal description of where he was.
Did you capture whatever it was that he said verbally in the Google Earth photos that you then chose to show to him?
Objection, Your Honor, you're saying.
Objection, what?
You're saying, Your Honor.
Overruled.
After listening to Detective Thorpe's interview with Spencer Wright, did you attempt to find on Google Earth where it was that he was located?
I did.
Were you able to locate an area that coincided with or matched the area he described being in?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to any reference to statements made by this witness who's not testifying as hearsay.
Your Honor, this witness is not going to tell the jury. First of all, we're not offering it was due to the matter asserted. We're offering it.
Yes,
to,
you do.
allow the jury to see what Mr. Sprinkel did in context. He located a certain area.
Let's not say what he did. We need to hear that from the witness.
Okay, so it's provided.
Overruled.
Thank you. So were you able to see that area described by Mr. Wright on Google Maps?
Yeah, I found an area that I believed he described, yes.
Why were you looking for the area where Mr. Wright described?
Well, specifically, because the area that I believed he described was also captured by the surveillance camera that captured the incident.
Okay.
So if Mr. Wright was where I believed he was based on what he said, then it would be in the surveillance footage. I would see him, or a human-like figure. Given the clarity of the surveillance footage, it wouldn't have been sufficient to actually make out his face, but I would have at least expected to see that.
Did you see Mr. Wright or a human-like figure in that area you were looking at on the surveillance footage?
I did not.
Did you fully capture that area on the still shots that you took down to show to Mr. Wright?
I did.
When did you meet with Mr. Wright?
This would have been January 12th of 2016,
Where did you meet with Mr. Wright?
the Atlanta City Jail.
Now, was Mr. Wright being held on felony or misdemeanor charges?
It's a probation violation on a felony case.
Now, did you offer anything to Mr. Wright in exchange for him speaking with you?
I didn't.
Had, to your knowledge, anything been offered to Mr. Wright by your office in exchange for him speaking with you?
Not to my knowledge.
Was there any insinuation that you would lower his charges or drop his probation warrants?
Not by me.
Was there any made by anyone associated with you that you have any knowledge of?
No, not to my knowledge. I have absolutely no information to indicate that that ever happened.
Who went with you when you talked to Mr. Wright?
The aforementioned, the investigator I mentioned yesterday, David White.
How long, do you remember how long you met with Mr. Wright?
Probably maybe like an hour. I audio recorded it, so however long the audio recording is how long I met with him. Well, in relevant part. And I audio recorded the entire thing. It would probably 45 minutes to an hour and a half.
Now that is something Mr. Sprinkel seemed to do. he records his meetings. Do you know who doesn't? Miss Love. Do you know who else who doesn't? Miss Hilton. Neither of them records their meetings with witnesses or potential witnesses in this case. And then the argument is, well, you can always ask them. Yeah, but we also know Miss Love is a lying liar who lies. And she has investigators who lies.
I would expect somewhere in there.
Did you video record it as well?
I did not. In fact, I brought a voice recorder no, I just brought a pocket voice recorder.
Now, why weren't you in an interview room video recording you all's interaction?
It was actually in a pod, like an inmate dorm at the Atlanta City Jail where Investigator White and I interviewed him. And there was like a little, like a break-off room to the side of the pod, and we just met him in there. There was a table and chairs in there, and we just talked to him.
And were any other inmates around while you talked to him? Present?
Well, they weren't in the room with us. I don't recall if they were out and about in the dorm. But yeah, there were other inmates. I don't recall that any of them were within earshot of us, though.
Not within earshot. Is that what you said?
I don't know. Certainly nothing happened during the interview that alerted me that somebody was listening in. I'll leave it at that. And I don't recall having a feeling at the time that, because I believe I would have. That would have left an impression on me if I thought that others were eavesdropping. And I didn't have any feelings of that sort while I was doing the interview.
Now, how many images did you show to Mr. Wright?
I don't know exactly how many. Let's see. Probably like 15 to 20.
Were all 15 to 20 images that you showed to Mr. Wright?
Probably more like 10 to 15, actually. It was somewhere around there. It was less than 25.
Were all of the images that you showed to Mr. Wright images captured from the barbershop footage in front of which the murder occurred?
Yes, it was Google Earth still shots that just depicted the scene, and still shots from the barbershop surveillance footage.
Starting with the Google Earth still shots that depicted the scene, what did you do with those still shots?
I printed them out
Okay.
prior to going into the interview.
And, and when you showed them to Spencer Wright, given that they weren't from the actual night of the murder, what were you doing with them?
Well, given that the scene had remained, from the time the murder happened to the time that the Google Earth vehicle photographed the scene, had remained unchanged. In other words, the lay of the land was essentially the same.
Mhm.
My objective was for Mr. Wright to identify where both he was and other parties were at various times during when he witnessed the incident, according to him.
Okay, so was Mr. Wright, without saying where or what he said, but was he able to point out an area that he was claiming to have been at?
Yes, he did.
And was that area also captured in the surveillance footage from the barbershop?
It was.
Now, was the lighting the same on the Google Maps images that you showed him as it was on the night of the murder that was captured on surveillance?
No, because the Google Map images were captured during daylight hours, whereas the homicide occurred during just after nightfall or during twilight hours.
Were there any identifiable landmarks in the area that you were interested in regarding Mr. Wright that were clearly depicted on the Google Earth printouts? Stationary objects.
Well, there was a bench, yes.
And where was that bench located?
It was located at a bus stop.
Where?
Where's the bus stop?
Yes.
It's across the street from 330 McDaniel Street.
About how far from 330 McDaniel Street?
However wide the street is, I don't know, 30 yards, 40 yards.
Okay.
Because it wasn't like directly across the street. I mean, it was sufficient that it was captured within the surveillance footage, but it was kind of, I guess it depends on how you define it. It was definitely across the street, but if we're going through the front door of the barbershop, it wasn't directly across the street from the front door. It's kind of like diagonal. Yeah.
Diagonal? All right. Is that bench visible on the surveillance footage?
It is.
Were you interested in looking at a particular time on the surveillance footage after listening to Mr. Wright's interview and speaking with him yourself?
I was.
And what particular time were you interested in looking
Minutes.
Well, time is in a constant here because there's the time that I believe the incident happened, and then there's the timestamp on the video, which differed.
at? Okay. And so let's start with the time that the incident happened. If it's different than the time on the video, how do you go about finding what time to look at?
Well, I'm watching the video. If you, in this case, you have a surveillance video, and the incident of which we're speaking is prominently featured when you watch that video. So I could just watch the video and wait for that incident to occur, and that's when I knew that the portion of the video that I was viewing was relevant insofar as it depicted the incident, regardless of the timestamp emblazoned thereon.
And during that time that you're looking at the video, are you able to discern where that bench at the bus stop is in relation to where the shooting occurred?
Like it was about, like I said, across the street, not directly across the street, but probably across the street and maybe 20 to 30 yards to the right if you're facing across the street from the barbershop.
Did Mr. Wright recognize the bench in the surveillance footage, or were you able to show him the bench in the surveillance footage?
In your honor. Calls for hearsay and also confrontation clause.
Sustained.
I would withdraw that.
It was sustained. It's already gone. You don't need to say, "Oh, I will redraw it." No, it was redrawn by the court.
Did you ever see Mr. Wright in any part of the surveillance footage of the murder, or someone fitting his description anywhere near that bench? And by anywhere near, I mean sitting on or within 1 foot of the bench during the time of the murder.
No, there were no human-like figures around the bench. I saw a cat at one point.
You saw what?
It looked to be a cat.
A cat. You could see a cat on the surveillance video?
Yeah, that's what struck me. It wasn't real high fidelity, but it was, the light was bright enough and the fidelity was sufficient to see a feline moseying around the bench, but there was unambiguously, there were no people around the bench.
Did you check the surveillance maybe like a few minutes or minutes after and minutes before the murder, just to see if perhaps there was a human at that bench?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I did. I watched that footage many, many times. Of course, the most relevant period to me was the time when the incident actually occurred. But no, I didn't see a human at that bench.
And how many times did you watch that video?
I didn't keep count, but it would have been many, 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 many times. So at least 150 to, I don't know. It was many times.
Why did you watch the video so many times?
To see every time I
Tell the jury.
every time I watched, I was hoping to see something maybe I hadn't noticed before, the way the light bounces off one of the vehicles, because that was a big part for me. I wanted to figure out what sort of vehicles we were dealing with here. I actually had the video enhanced at one point because like I said, the video wasn't very high quality. So yeah, I had to kind of try to fill in the blanks myself. That's why I viewed it so many times. And also just, I always would hope, a lot of times it would probably just be in futility, but I would always hope to see something I hadn't seen before.
Now, when you said you had the video enhanced, would you tell the jury what you mean? I mean, when you say enhanced, what did you do?
I sent it off to private corporate companies or individual. There were two. It was Target, like the retail store. They have a division within their company that deals with surveillance footage. And they at the time, maybe they still do, but at the time, they would digitally enhance surveillance videos. And there was another gentleman named Walter Pineda who offered the same services. He was an individual.
Why did you send it out to two different places?
Just, I guess the more the better.
Were either of those places able to allow you to see anything more clearly in the video?
A little bit. Yeah, it helped a little bit. Yeah, it's digital. So there's really only so much they can do to clean it up. It's just ones and zeros. But they are programs that can, I guess, kind of filter out some of the noise from the picture and that kind of thing. And that's what they did. So it helped a little bit.
Now, is it
So you altered it.
unusual for you to take surveillance footage in unindicted cases you receive from law enforcement officers and send it out to other agencies to have it, to see if you could have it enhanced at all?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
It is actually, I think it's the only case I've ever actually done that on.
And why then did you choose to do it on this case?
Because the video was so important and I really needed to identify as much as I could in that video.
Now, was this, when you say the video was so important, was this particular homicide case for you any more important than the others or any others that you worked on, the case itself?
No, it wasn't any more important. Any case, it got more attention because for my purposes, it was essentially unsolved right when I got it. And so that elevates the priority of any homicide case. I wouldn't say priority isn't the right word. It really isn't. It's just the amount of time that I'm going to spend on it certainly goes way up.
Okay. And when you said it got more attention because it was unsolved, how often did you get unsolved cases in your capacity as an unindicted homicide?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
Not very often, thankfully. The police don't normally make charges on.
Relevant and non-responsive.
Sustained,
So,
sustained.
all right, when you say not often, can you tell the jury approximately how many unsolved homicide cases you worked with during your time? And it doesn't have to be an exact number. Surprise. Because my follow-up question is gonna rely on.
Maybe 20 to 30 truly unsolved cases.
And
When he's talking about truly unsolved, he is excluding what he believes are technically solved, because they found out that the suspect was deceased or similar situations. Those are technically solved, so it doesn't count them. Now, I do. Why? Because it wasn't brought to court and trial and to a jury. I don't care if the investigator or the prosecutor or the cop is convinced. I really don't. Unless there's conviction, it's unsolved.
those other 20 to 30 cases, did you perform acts or investigations in the same manner that you performed your investigation or further investigation of this particular case?
I did.
And did that include seeking out witnesses that had not previously been identified?
That is correct.
Did that also include finding jail calls
It
that
did.
had not been identified?
It did.
Did it include going out to scenes?
It did.
Did it include interviewing people who had already been interviewed?
It did.
And do you, with those other cases, did you include as part of the case files, recordings that you conducted, recordings of persons that you conducted interviews with?
Yes.
And did you include any cell phone data, jail calls, social media, things of that nature that you found during your independent investigation of the case?
I did.
Now, why, Ms. Love, why don't you record your interviews with the witnesses in this case? Can you please tell us? All right, yeah, I know. Because that would mean there's evidence of your misconduct.
And after you got the video enhanced of the barbershop, did you review any other, or I should say, did you review any other video besides the barbershop video?
I did. There was that video from the Texaco station. I reviewed that.
The video from the Texaco station, were you familiar with how to work that system when you first got it?
Well, I didn't, when you say system, I didn't receive the original recording apparatus.
Okay.
But the software, yes. I mean, I figured it out and was able to view the video.
When you first got that video, was the timestamp on that video the same? In other words, was the time on that video the same or different than the time on the barbershop video?
From what I recall, the barbershop surveillance video is considerably more accurate than the video from, or excuse me, the Texaco station video is considerably more accurate than the barbershop video, if not entirely accurate.
Okay. So if it was different, how were you able to look at the Texaco video and determine anything as it relates to what was happening in the barbershop?
So the frames there are certain parts of the frames that overlapped. So in other words, So you had a camera at the barber shop that was capturing the street, and then you had a camera mounted over at the Texaco that was also capturing that same street, and the two cameras were capturing part of the same part of the street. So if I saw something happening in one frame, I could just marry it up to the from the image caught by the other camera. And if I have, for example, and that's how I would be able to tell. So in other words, I wasn't using the timestamp, particularly in the barber shop, since the timestamp was wonky. But even if the timestamp looks correct, it could still be a few seconds off, you know. So I was mostly things that were constants to me were like vehicles driving by the scene, or when gunshots ring out, you know, I would look for that. So so on the Texaco footage, I don't recall exactly. There was a blue car that came into the gas station. There was something that was captured on both cameras that I was able to use as a marking point to sync up the two pieces of footage.
Okay. When you were reviewing the Texaco footage, did you only look at the time frame that you thought that the murder occurred?
No, I particularly as I continued my review, I looked at probably like 30 or 40 minutes before the murder occurred. I looked at the entire piece of footage.
We're going to come back to the Texaco footage, but I want to ask you, after looking at the Texaco footage, did you do anything to identify persons or objects that you saw in the Texaco footage?
I did.
Would you tell the jury how you went about identifying certain persons and objects? If you need me to clarify, ask me to clarify.
Well, there was, and without getting into, so there was an event that occurred on the video. First thing is that I was looking for something specifically that, based on other evidence in the case, I'll just keep it broad or general here. Based on other evidence in the case, I suspected I was going to see on the video. And then as I watched the video during that time frame, I did in fact see what I thought I was going to see.
Did or did not?
I did.
Okay.
And it was a vehicle specifically. There was a certain vehicle. And when I saw it, based on other things that I'd seen, and specifically I'm talking about social media records, photos, and cell phone tower data, I thought I wonder if this person is at the gas station. And when I looked at the footage, I said, oh, well, I recognize that vehicle from social media. And then as I continued to watch the footage, I recognized one of the people that was inside. It was a passenger in that vehicle, because that person walked into the store and they got close to the camera. And because they were close to an interior surveillance camera in a well-lit store, I was able to see their face. And then as other things happened around this vehicle that I recognized in the footage, complete investigative tasks to figure out who the other people were. I already knew who one of the people was, the person that was driving the vehicle, or I had a strong suspicion as to who was driving the vehicle I was looking for based on cell phone records and social media photos and videos. So I already knew right when I saw it. I had a pretty good idea. I knew for a fact who one of the person was, and the person who was driving the vehicle, I had a pretty good idea who it was.
All right, let's unpack a little bit of that. Now, what vehicle were you looking for?
It was a 2002 Pontiac Bonneville.
What color?
Gray.
Why were you looking for, better yet, did you have a particular reason for seeking out that vehicle?
Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
I haven't asked him what anybody said.
I don't know.
No,
The answer's gonna be,
no
but it
court today.
potentially could.
So that is why we are recapping Mr. Sprinkel's testimony, because I haven't seen it yet. And I'm not impressed so far.
Was there a particular person of interest to you based on what you had learned during your investigation up to that point?
Objection, called for hearsay.
Sustained.
Were you looking for any particular gray Pontiac Bonneville?
There was one particular gray Pontiac Bonneville that I was interested in, yes.
All right. And who did that Pontiac Bonneville belong to?
It either belonged to or is associated with a man named Javoris Bradford.
Belong to or associated with are two completely different things. Belong to means you own it. You have the papers. Associated with, one of his mates might have one. Two different things.
There a nickname for Javoris Bradford?
Tuda, T-U-D-A.
All right. Now, did you attempt to locate any social media footage that related to Javoris Bradford or Tuda?
I did.
Would you please turn to the jury and tell the jury how you went about locating social media accounts associated with Javaris, Bradford, or Tuda.
Well, I just searched for him probably on Facebook first, because particularly back then it was easier. And I either found him or a family member on Facebook, and then browsing the family member's profile. And this may not be exactly how I did it, because I don't recall exactly how I found Mr. Bradford's Instagram page. But somehow or another because on Instagram, he went by the moniker I'm_living_great at the time.
Mhm.
And so basically probably starting at Facebook, finding family members, fanning out, and then on finding him on Facebook, finding maybe where he screenshot an Instagram page and pasted it to his Facebook. That would be how I would have found his Instagram page somehow. And then, and like I said, his Instagram name was I'm_living_great.
And did he have himself depicted in that Instagram footage?
I'm going to object. That's hearsay.
Overruled.
What did he have himself depicted in that social media footage or social media information that you saw with any kind of vehicle in particular?
Yes, it was a 2002 Pontiac Bonneville.
Right?
It was.
Okay. Did you ever discern or gain a number for Tuda? Did you ever learn of a phone number for Tuda?
I did pretty early on, actually.
Where did you get the phone number for Tuda?
So I testified previously about how
But don't talk about your previous testimony. Have you ever testified in front of this jury?
yes, that was something I said earlier today.
Okay. So without referring to the fact that you previously testified, just tell the jury.
No, I'm talking about like previous testimony, like a few minutes ago.
Okay, go ahead. Tell the jury.
All right. So one of the ways I find jail calls is I go through phone records that I had in the case. And in this case, I had some phone records.
Okay.
And I don't recall whose phone records it was exactly. But I just started running numbers that appeared in the phone records, whether they be numbers that were called by the handset, the records of which I was reviewing, or numbers that called that handset. It didn't matter to me, just whatever. I was running them through the jail call database. And one of those, because like I said, I was trying to get intel. It wasn't just, obviously on the night of the shooting, the murder. Yeah, I mean, I would expect that the people that committed weren't in the Fulton County Jail, so I obviously wasn't looking for inmates to be saying that they did it.
Okay.
But I was trying to get for intel from people that maybe were being called from inmates. And one of those numbers was 404-957-8008. And I'm flipping through these discs to refresh my recollection, to make sure that I'm citing that. Yes, that is right. 404-957-8008 was one of the numbers that appeared in those phone records and that I ran through the jail call database. And on doing so, I did find calls that I deemed relevant that were placed on the night of the homicide from an inmate inside the jail.
So, Madam Court Reporter, and I suspect some of the jurors have informed me that you are speaking a little too fast. Do you mind slowing down and saying what you just said one more time?
Yes, I found a number inside within the phone call logs that were obtained by the Atlanta Police Department for one of the parties of interest, whether it be a person of interest or a witness or a defendant, whoever it may have been. And it didn't matter to me. All I wanted were numbers from the phone numbers of people that may have known something about the homicide and may have been called either on the night of the murder, the day after the murder, 2 days after the murder, whenever they were called.
You're getting really fast again with
All
the
right.
talking, so try to slow down.
All right. And one of those numbers of the many that I ran was 404-957-8008. I ran it through the jail call database, and I found that there were 2 calls I was able to retrieve anyway. I think at least 2 that were placed to that number on the night of the murder from an inmate inside the Fulton County Jail, and they were placed after the 8:00 p.m. hour. I think they're maybe between 8 and 9 p.m. that evening.
Now, why did that particular piece of information have any value to your investigation?
What piece of information exactly?
That there were 2 calls made to that number by an inmate at the jail on the night of the murder, around 8, or at the time you specified.
Well, I listened to the calls, and it sounded to me like they were talking about the homicide.
All right. So were you able to identify who it was that was inside the jail that was making the call to that number?
I did.
How did you identify who it was inside the jail making the call to 404-957-8008?
Well, I believe, would you like me to say the name?
Well, number one, I would at some point, but hold on before you do. And let me ask you this. If you need to refresh your memory with any part of your report, would you just alert us that you're doing so and go ahead and read whatever you need to read?
Okay.
Do you need to refresh your memory at all?
No.
Okay. How did you learn the name of the person inside the jail?
It was placed from the account of the inmate.
Okay. And how were you able to determine that the persons whose name was on the account is the actual person who's making the call?
Well, I gained familiarity with his voice by listening to other phone calls that the inmate made with persons that were well known to him. And then I later confirmed it by just like listening to the call with the inmate.
Okay.
He affirmed it.
All right. So tell the jury who it was that was inside the jail.
Martinez Arnold,
And does Martinez Arnold, to your knowledge, go by any other name?
Duke.
All right. At the time that Martinez Arnold was inside the jail, and what date was that you are talking about? January?
It was January 10th, the phone call. It was January 10th, 2015.
During that time, do you have any information about what color Mr. Martinez Arnold's hair may have been?
At the time they placed the phone call?
No, around the time of early 2015, do you know whether or not, if you don't, that's fine. Do you know anything about color of his hair?
No.
All right. So once you listened to the calls, did you attempt to get any more calls made from the Fulton County Jail?
I did. I downloaded a lot of jail calls on this case.
What jail calls, how did you go about deciding which jail calls in this case you were going to download?
Well, I tend to be I'll download because the jail calls don't reside on the server, the Securus Corporation server forever. I try to err on the side of just downloading them. So as I ran those numbers through the Fulton County Jails database, any calls that came back on the numbers from this phone, like the phone records, I just download them. But what would prompt me to pay particular attention to them is if they were placed in close temporal proximity to the homicide. Certainly a call placed like an hour or two after the homicide would be something I'd want to listen to. Also, I downloaded calls of the defendants that they placed following their arrests at the Fulton County Jail. I put those in the file as well.
Okay. And at the time that you were looking for the phone number and confirming, you picked up something in front of you. What is it that you have on the stack of items in front of you?
Those are just, I burned all of the jail calls. Not every single jail call I download during but most of, I tried to confine or memorialize as much as I could to this report that I testified about earlier today. It's 140 pages long. And as I went through the report.
The answer is non-responsive to the question.
Listen to the question and try to focus on answering the question that's asked.
I'm also going to object to the relevance of the length of his report.
Sustained.
What is it that those are in front of you?
They're just the jail calls that I testified to downloading and interviews that I conducted. I burned them to disk.
Okay. And the one that you picked up, to refresh your memory about the 404-957-8008, would you pick that up?
Okay. Here we go.
If the secondina asks, aren't they supposed to get a warrant for all that, all the phone calls and for media like Facebook? Not jail calls, because they are subject for law enforcement to get in and get it whenever they like. Media, like or social media like Facebook, if Georgia law is anything like Swedish law, then public postings are public. So it's up for grabs. So don't make your crimes public, folks. Not a legal advice, just a general good advice. If there's something that can come back and bite you, don't show it.
I'm going to show you
I don't need to see.
Created yesterday.
Okay.
Uh,
that you just handled.
Yes, this is a disc that I created yesterday.
Okay.
That's my handwriting. And in fact, I signed the disc, my signature.
Okay.
This is a disc that contains the jail calls to 404-957-8008 that I downloaded.
Now, when you
Is
said
this
that you
been shared
downloaded it
with the
yesterday,
defense?
do you keep all of the jail calls that you download in a particular case somewhere where you can later copy it to a disk, or how do you? What
They're on
do
a
you
server. My case file, all the case files are on a server. They're all digital. They're just stored on a computer.
Okay. Had the name Javaris Bradford come up in the case file that you received from Detective Thorpe?
No.
And do you recall approximately how long after you received the case file from Detective Thorpe that you became interested in the name Javaris Bradford?
It would have been on or around January 10th, 2016, when I found the jail calls that are on State's Exhibit 5004.
I think that's 500Y.
Oh, 501, excuse me. All right.
Thank you, Judge. I'm sorry. Chairman Henry. What about the name Martinez Arnold? Did you know about that name? Was that name in Detective Thorpe's case file that he gave to you?
That I don't recall. I don't know that I don't recall if he was in the case file or
Now,
not.
let me ask a better question. At the time you received the case file from Detective Thorpe, was the name Martinez Arnold of any interest to you in this investigation?
I don't recall.
Did you note anywhere in your report whether or not it was?
I'm sure I referenced him in my report insofar as he was the inmate that placed the call that became of interest to me. But I'll just say this: he was in jail on the night of the murder.
Okay. Before downloading those calls, did you know he was in jail on the night of the murder?
I don't know if I knew or not.
Okay. After you downloaded those calls from the night of the murder, did you find any other numbers of interest to you in this investigation?
Numbers.
Phone numbers. Did you find or locate any other phone numbers or persons that were of interest to you?
Yes.
What phone numbers did you find?
Well, yeah, I get there was a number. There was a lot of. I mean, I remember doing quite a few search warrants for cell phone numbers and focusing on cell phone numbers or records that had been obtained by the police department.
Okay. So going back to the way you described obtaining information to conduct more investigations, did you follow the practice that you ordinarily follow in terms of search warrants to get more information, to gather or follow up on information you learned?
Yes.
With respect to Spencer Wright, did you ever see any jail calls from him?
I did.
All right. Now, where did you look to find jail calls from?
For Spencer Wright?
Yes.
Well, I wasn't able to look for the jail calls myself for him. They were on a different system because he was at the Atlanta City Jail. So I reached out to someone there and asked them to pull them for me.
So thank you for clarifying that. Is reaching out to someone at a different facility with access to calls you don't have access to something that you did only in this case?
As Erin Olivia says, geofencing is about to become prohibited except with a warrant. No more sweeping up others' phones and info. And if, let's see here. This is a Fifth Circuit ruling. This is from August of this year. Court rules geofence warrants are illegal searches under the Fourth Amendment. Federal Appeals Court ruled on Friday that geofence warrants, which are used to identify all users or devices in a geographic area, are prohibited by the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches. The ruling was issued by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which is generally regarded as the most conservative appeals court. The Fifth Circuit holding creates a circuit split with the Fourth Circuit, which last month rejected a different Fourth Amendment challenge to geofence warrants. So it depends on which circuit you are under if geofence is even allowed with warrants. Yeah, police are going to hate this, but you can't just sweep in and grab everything. You need probable cause, at least.
Or is that a practice that you, follow to get information?
No, I've done that on other cases. That's not uncommon.
And if you slow down and speak to the mic and to the jury, say that.
Yeah, yes, I've reached out to other facilities, jails and prisons, correctional facilities in the past to obtain calls, recorded calls placed by the inmates that I don't have direct access by way of a login and password at some website.
Okay. And so when you reached out to the Atlanta City Jail, what information were you trying to get if you didn't know or have Spencer Wright's jail calls or phone number? What were you trying to get?
I just wanted to see what Spencer Wright, I wanted to hear, I should say, what Spencer Wright was saying to people after his arrest in October 2015.
And did you ask for a specific time frame of calls or just all the calls? What did you ask?
From what I recall, I asked for all the calls that had been made from his account since the beginning of his incarceration at the Atlanta City Jail. And then I believe I also had a few phone numbers that I wanted to run, that I asked them to run queries specifically in the event that he utilized another inmate's account to call that number.
So that's interesting. So when you say in the event he utilized another inmate's phone number, where did you get the phone numbers that you wanted them to run to see if he was using another inmate's phone number?
That I don't remember.
All right.
I did probably just phone numbers that they're probably just it may have been the same phone numbers that I ran through the Fulton County jail database. Not knowing who Mr. Wright knew or he didn't know, I'm sure I just thought, just out of curiosity, run all these numbers. Maybe I had a phone number for a family member that I found.
Did you follow the same procedure you used in all of your other unindicted homicides?
I did.
In terms of running those numbers?
I did.
All right. Did you have jail calls, since this was 2016 that you're looking for these? Did you have jail calls for Spencer Wright that went back into 2015?
I believe so. Yes, I did.
And did you find a phone number? And if you don't recall, let me know and I'll refer you to your report. And I can actually, so that it is preserved for the record. Just look at this. I'm gonna label Your Honor, just for the purposes of the record, 501 Yankee Romeo. And it's a report that we have previously provided to counsel for the defense. If either of them need to look at it, it's here.
Would this take a time for our morning break?
Yes.
Okay, let's take our morning break.
Yes, Ms. Love, you can't just hand it over without the defense checking, because you have provided with wrong information before. So they are going to check you. All right, skip over morning break.
The 24 hours wasn't.
Let's see what they discussed here. If it
Attorney
is-
Hilton a moment ago.
Okay.
There's a gentleman outside. His name is Mr. Bush. It's spelled B-U-S-C-H. And he mentioned to me that he drove to your courthouse. He did not take his medication. He has a spinal issue. He's on prescription medication.
Okay.
He was subpoenaed last night by the DA's office, told to be here at 9. He came even though, the 24 hours wasn't complied with. But I
Right.
spoke with Ms. Hilton, if, just as a courtesy, if he's not going to be called or used, he'd like to go home, take the medication and sleep in bed.
He was outside the hallway, he's out there, so I'm waiting to see where he went, so I can go see him. But he was in the hallway a few seconds ago.
All right, so is that somebody you plan to call today?
We probably did release him, so that's why I want to talk to him to see.
well, we know they didn't.
Okay.
But this is how poorly the prosecution plans their witnesses, since they are a bit caught off guard with, at this point in time, with Mr. Zachary. They are scrambling to find people. And I mean, they have over 100 witnesses left. And they still have issues getting witnesses there in time. and even letting the defense know. Eternity, why Love do so many overnight subpoenas? Because she is incompetent, and she hopes she can get away with it.
All right. Anything else? I guess we need Ms. Love back for the witness testimony.
Yes.
Should you want to, and is Mr. Sprinkel available still? Okay. Okay, let's give Mr.
There's not much of a difference between Mr. Sprinkel standing up and sitting down, actually. I know it happened. That was on day 133 when that happened, and that was when a few days after, on day 135 or 136, she whined and moaned about Mr. Shard during cross-examination, making some gesture with his documents, while she herself takes every opportunity to show pictures to the jury underhandedly. And look at Eternity! Welcome to the Viking crew! Yay! First new member of today. You now have access to all my members-only content, members-only emojis here on YouTube, and on the community section on YouTube, you will find a link to my Discord, which is for you members to get to know each other and talk about the cases and stuff like that. Okay, thank you so much, Eternity. That is so nice of you. Thank you so much for your support of this channel.
Thirteen of your report, and if you need to refresh your recollection, just read over it and look up when you've refreshed your memory.
Okay.
All right. So did you gather phone calls from Mr. Wright that were going back as far as 2015?
Yes,
And would you tell the jury if they went back as far as November 5th, 2015?
they did go back as far as November 5th, 2015, because I obtained a call that Mr. Wright placed on November 5th, 2015.
Now, how many calls did you obtain from Mr. Wright, if you know?
The total number of calls, I do not know. I did put them on a disc though, so the disc would obviously have all the calls that I ran, but it would be over a dozen.
Over a dozen?
It'd be, I believe, well over a dozen actually.
And if you have that disc, would you pull that out?
Sure, let's see. Here we go, right here.
All right, and we'll label this disc 501. Do you know how many calls you listened to of Spencer Wright?
Several. I'm
Okay.
sure one that was of particular interest to me though.
And was that the first call that you listened to, or did you have to listen to more than one before you got to that call?
I don't recall. I likely, unless I got real lucky, had to listen to several calls before I found that one.
Now, tell the jury, without detailing the content of the call itself, what date the call was that you found,
November 5th, 2015,
and what number was the call made to?
404-406-7784.
And is 501 Yankee the disc that you just gave to me that you said you downloaded the calls
Yes, this is
made
the,
by Spencer Wright?
yes, this is the disc that contains the calls that I requested from the Atlantic City Jail, the jail calls, the recorded calls placed from either Mr. Wright or numbers that of which I was curious.
Now, tell the jury, without detailing the content of the call itself, what date the call was that you found?
November 5th, 2015, 404-406-7784.
After you listened to the call, did you say what time that call was made on November 5th, 2015?
1:28 p.m.
And was that in, when you say 128, did you list it, is it listed on the recording or the CD as 128 or in military hours 1328?
It's likely 13:28
Okay.
on the actual timestamp, but probably there's a second value in there as well.
Okay. And was the call between, were you able to tell if it was Mr. Wright on the call?
I was able to tell, yes.
And was Mr. Wright speaking with a man or a woman?
He's speaking with a man.
And without saying what either person said, are you able to tell the jury the subject of the call?
The subject of the call was
Honor calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
the subject of the call was Mr. Wright talking about what he.
Well,
Right, don't say
let's,
what he's talking about. Don't say, without saying what anyone said. Let me be more specific. Was the
all right, okay. Go ahead.
was the subject of the call Mr. Wright's presence on scene at Dr. Thomas's murder?
Your Honor, calls for
Yes,
hearsay
sustained,
and leading.
yes,
Your Honor,
yes.
so I'll ask this question, and if it's an objection, but did they talk about Don Nutt in the call?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Your Honor, given that I'm not asking him anything for which I'm offering the truth of matter asserted, and it's a subject, I don't think that it's hearsay.
Okay, well, I appreciate that you don't think so.
So I'm gonna take that as you're not gonna reconsider.
Correct.
All right. So after you listened to that call on November 5th, 2015, 1:28 p.m., between Mr. Wright and the person he called at 404-406-7784, did you endeavor to locate the person to whom Mr. Wright was speaking in that call?
Yes, well, my first endeavor was to figure out who had that number. And then I asked David White, investigator David White, to locate him and speak to him.
All right. So back up a little bit. You said you endeavored to find out who had that number?
I did.
And was that the number ending in 7784?
That's correct.
And did you take the steps that you described for the jury earlier that you take in trying to determine what number belongs to what person?
I don't know if I went into great detail about that. I mean, there's numerous ways to figure out who a cell phone number belongs to.
Tell the jury.
I believe here, I found that somebody on Instagram posted that number in comments that were publicly visible as their number. In other words, there was an Instagram user that said, "Contact me at this number,"
Okay.
in a comment section of a post.
All right.
And then through perusing their Instagram profile, I eventually found enough biographical information. Like, today is my birthday. I don't know if that's specifically what happened here. It suffices to say that I found enough publicly available information about the person who posted that 7784 number as their own to figure out who they were.
And who did you have David White locate after you saw that Instagram information?
Are you saying the person I identified as posting that number as their own?
Yes.
The name was Jacquees. First name spelled Jocquise, Smalls. Last name spelled Smalls.
And did you find a date of birth for Jacquees Smalls?
September 27th, 1988.
Do you remember whether you,
I have no idea, Gwen.
whether
Well,
Investigator White was able to locate Mr. Smalls?
He from what I remember, he spoke to him on the phone.
Did you ever personally speak with him?
No, I don't think I ever did.
Did you listen to the phone call, or did you have David White record the phone call with Mr. Smalls?
Investigator White recorded it.
And did you listen to it?
I did.
All right.
Can I interrupt you just for a minute and have counsel come up to the bench? It doesn't have anything to do with what you're doing right now.
Okay. That brings us to sidebar counter 272. Oh. What's great with recapping the stuff I haven't seen yet in this trial due to work or other things is that I can get my sidebar counter up to actual speed. And we are closing in on 300 sidebars in this trial. So, dun, dun, dun.
Okay. All right, so y'all,
Okay.
all right, does anybody know where where did the state go? Can you ask anybody from the state to come back in for a second?
And they all left off.
Hey, just any of you. I just, so one thing we need to do is locate Mr. Scheib, and I don't know that we have his direct number, but I'm sure somebody does.
He's out in the hallway
Oh,
right now. That's what
okay.
we were doing.
Great. All right, so y'all need to get something together.
Yes.
And it sounds like within the hour, Mr. Zachary will be over here. And I
Yes,
don't
and we
know if you want to, you had mentioned earlier having a doctor talk to the court or something. I don't know if that's something you still want to do or.
No, not
Okay.
considering.
Oh, yeah. That doctor, I would not recommend for anybody. That doctor claimed that you can testify under the influence of opioids with no issues. You can't drive on oxycodone. Well, you can, but you know what I mean. And Zachary was met at this time, if I remember correctly, had two opioids, two of them in his system.
He's being released. It was for the purpose of discerning.
Whether he could be,
Yes.
okay. All right, so I don't know, can we leave to Ms. Hilton or another member of your team to get all of that in place and continue with this witness right now? Or,
Yes, she is doing that. And whatever the court instructs regarding that, I know you wanted to hear from Mr. Scheib. I didn't know if you wanted to hear from him before.
I don't need to hear from Mr. Scheib.
No, I mean, in terms of the agreement, the immunity agreement.
Again, I don't need to hear from Mr. Scheib unless y'all can't come to an agreement as to whatever the terms are going to be.
Okay.
If you can, great, just present it and I'll sign it.
Okay.
So if Ms. Hilton's handling that, then I'm happy to just continue on with this witness with the jury.
So she is out there talking to him, Your Honor, because of course that I'll be the person examining Mr. Zachary, and I'd just like to speak with Ms. Hilton and Mr. Scheib just quickly for a second, since they're out
All
there.
right, if it's a second, it's one, that's fine. If it's going to be that I need to send the jury to lunch,
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
think he'll be.
All right, take a couple of minutes and come back and report.
And another break.
Give us any idea of what time the court will be willing to stop for lunch? Or is it noon? Because we can keep going to whenever.
So I would like to be able to put Mr. Zachary on the stand as soon as he gets here. And so if he's going to get here within the hour, then we could either do a really quick lunch right now and then take him, or we can
Hey, Wilma.
do a late
Welcome.
lunch
Better
after
late
his
than
testimony.
never.
But how long do you think his testimony is going to be?
His testimony is going to be.
The rest of the
the
afternoon?
day. Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, maybe we just take a quick lunch now.
Okay. That's
And
fine.
then by the time we get back from lunch, hopefully he'll be here. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I
Okay.
just wanted the court's direction. That's all in
Okay.
terms of, because I didn't want to take Mr. Sprinkle like all the way through to the point where he's here and then we break for lunch and he's out there. and
No,
don't
I
want-
agree. I don't want him, once he's here, I'd like to go ahead and start his testimony, not say, well, it's nice that you're here, but we're breaking for lunch. So let's just break for a really early lunch right now. And you said you think he'll be here, or I don't know if you said that, The estimate from the sheriff's office is within.
1 hour.
Okay, so why don't we, it's 10 after 11. Why don't we break till quarter after 12?
That's fine for me. And if he's not here by that time, I don't have a problem continuing with Mr.
All right.
Sprinkel.
All right, and they broke for lunch. And let's see what happened after lunch.
Technical difficulty. She has been trying to email it and print it for the last 30 minutes, and she is scrambling because she said email is not working and the printer is not working. She just sent word. Miss Lieutenant.
All right. I don't know why it continues to be so cold in here. I keep adjusting it and it just doesn't change. It gets colder, I think, instead of warmer.
It is because Miss Love has no soul and
Thumb drive or anything.
does not generate heat. She might be a vampire.
So once I'm not.
Well, no, but everybody else does.
I just asked her to bring it over on a thumb drive because if we can't print, we can't email for whatever reason from her computer, will the court, look at it and if the court can print it or someone here can print it, then we can have it. She can do that.
That's fine. So this is something that Mr. Scheib has seen and approved of?
It is, but
Okay.
what we're sending to the court also with the motion and the.
Okay. I just electronically.
You have that. You have that. You have it bring-
Do you have it electronically on?
They're bringing all three on a thumb drive. That was what we said.
Right. I just wondered if Mr. Scheib might have it on his email, on his phone, and then he could maybe try to email it to us and we could print it.
No, everything goes to mom.
Okay. That's
I
fine.
know that mom.
Wow. Okay.
Everything goes to mom.
Dragon Breath DA is causing. Well, it might not be Dragon Breath.
Adrian in the courthouse spewing fire. Every word she utters smells like a tire. Her arguments hit like a flat balloon. Manure tornado in the courtroom noon. Her voice a chainsaw cutting through the air. But the logic's missing, nothing's really there. Whirling out of circles, losing grip. Every point she makes is just a slip. Another tornado spreading wide. All her arguments turn to hide. Courtroom laughter when she's done. Prosecutor Adrian ain't one.
Christine has been a member for 14 months. Thank you so much for your continuous support of this channel, Christine. Yeah, for you who are completely new here because of the hurricane and everything, I have an AI songwriter fetish. Every time something interesting happens in this case that I can ask the AI songwriter to make a song about, I will. And for instance, a few months ago, there was a guy on the stand whose only job for the police is putting out, these little evidence tags. For instance, here's a shell casing here, yellow flags. So I did a yellow flag guy song.
Yellow flag guy in the morning light. Not quite sure, but he's trying right. Marks the clues with yellow signs. Never solves the case, but keeps us alive.
And of course, a fan favorite. Remember Quez and Little Mike, who doesn't exist?
Chris and Lil Mike, they be strolling through Atlanta streets. Crimes unfolding, but here's the twist. They're just a myth, ghosts in the night. They don't exist. Streets are bullet.
Yeah, I have a few, and I have Miss Sylvia's and Kayla's absolute least favorite song.
Drip drop, water cold as the night clock. Slipping on the tile, ain't a friendly spot. Steamy like the sun up, but the vibe ain't hot. Speakers sitting high, say a prayer on the dot. Voices echo out like a haunted house. Shivers down the spine, can't escape the mouse. Eyes shifting fast like a powder warehouse. Back against the wall, that's the jailhouse joust. Nut juice dripping, man, it's slipping on the ground. Ain't no.
Yeah, I have way too much fun with the AI songwriting app. Way too much fun.
That's either very retro or very forward of you, one or the other.
I don't tweet, I'm gonna usually I have everything. Paralegal doing me.
You've got good assistants. Okay.
I know it's very, very old.
I don't know why it's so, old. Yes, I thought you said cold because it's that too.
Does the court wish to, we have a printed out copy of this.
Sure, I can look at least that.
And we'll,
I mean, I assume I know pretty much the motion's going to say what y'all presented orally in court.
correct. It's-
Okay.
Yes. It tracks the language of it.
All right, and I have some good news about Cat Not Williams. I just saw that she put up. Oh, for tomorrow. Okay, for tomorrow. I thought it was for today. Does she have anything for today? No, for tomorrow. So she is alive and well, and she has a stream for tomorrow about Lieutenant Dennis. So she's recapping as well.
I couldn't hear what she was saying.
I mean,
That's fine.
We were just asking it be filed under seal, that's all.
That's fine.
do you want it filed under seal? I mean, what's the basis for filing it under
Let
seal?
me consult. I've actually never had one of these done.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's normally, if
Normally it
It
occurs
doesn't
prior
matter.
to the person, basically walking into court to testify.
Your Honor, I am not speaking for Ms. Love or Mr. Schott. For myself, on behalf of Mr. Stillwell, I would like a copy of the order granting immunity.
That's fine. And unless if somebody wants to vocalize a reason, it needs
Yeah, and Miss Love tried to postpone this as well.
to be filed under seal. I don't intend to have it filed under seal,
That's
given the, circumstances of,
I'm not asking it to be filed under.
okay.
that's fine. And I wasn't trying to keep a copy from the defense. I'm actually bringing the electronic copy for everybody to have.
I don't have it.
And when you can, I'd like to
There it
discuss
goes.
the rules. Since I'm his lawyer, am I going to be permitted to object if they badger him?
No,
or just,
no.
is he
You're
gonna-
here so that if he wants to consult with you,
Okay, and I was going to ask that.
but
if he
yeah,
wants to
no,
consult
I
with me.
mean, you're, you're not a party to the case.
Yeah, this also, I remember, this explains to me why witnesses with lawyers, and I've been questioning, why don't they object? And now we found out they are not allowed to object in this trial. Lawyers to witnesses. And that explains a lot. Now, where were we? Yeah, the rest of what's going on here, I already covered. What I haven't covered is the last thing that happened Wednesday. So let's get to that. This means that we will be fully caught up with this trial before it restarts Monday. But the rest of day 134 I already covered. So I'm up to speed. Now it is the final 2 hours of Wednesday. I've heard this is especially boring, so I will play it in 1.5 speed so we get through it. But we need to get through it so we are all up to speed, especially moi. And again, tonight or this afternoon, your Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m., Friday panel show. Don't you forget about it. I haven't set it up yet. I'm still waiting for replies to who will join me. I would assume that if Kat and Kayla and Sylvia can, they will. I'm just waiting for the replies. We need to remember, there's been a hurricane.
L-E-A-L.
We're actually going to have you step back out. We're going to take a quick recess. Thank you.
Oh.
All right.
If you want to, well, actually just stand and then once, okay.
What's this one, is it?
Ready? Oh, okay.
Now, who is this guy?
Yes, I will.
will.
Yes, sir. My name is Ricardo Leal. It's R-I-C-A-R-D-O. First name spelled L-E-A-L.
Good afternoon, Mr. Leal. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, sir.
Can you tell the jury where you work?
Yes, so I work for T-Mobile Corporation, which is a mobile phone carrier.
How long have you been with T-Mobile?
So I started with T-Mobile back in April of 2020. There was a merger that transpired on that date. Prior to that, I worked for Sprint Corporation, which was another telephone company. And so I worked with them, basically started with them in 2002.
Was the merger between...
We found Mr. Rico! Rico! We found... Oh, we found Rico. There he is.
Sprint and T-Mobile?
Yes.
What do you do for T-Mobile?
So I serve as a records custodian when subpoenaed. My job title is testifier. So basically, I authenticate records, explain records, how they're kept, in the normal course of business, do a lot of reviewing records, those types of things.
How many trials have you testified in?
So I've testified in over 450 in my tenure. I've been doing this part of my job for quite some time.
Do you travel across the country or do you have a specific region that you cover?
All throughout the United States and other places as well.
So to become, what did you do, let me take a step back, before you began working with Sprint, before it merged with T-Mobile?
So when I worked at Sprint, I would have been an analyst, essentially. Subpoena analyst is what they called it. So my job function was to review legal demands, verify that legal demand, then send out the information that is being asked for through legal process. However, the requester was asking for it. So essentially, that's what I was doing for a number of years. And then I headed up a team that was an immediate response group, that they could get their information sooner by paying a fee. And then I transitioned into the job that I'm currently doing, but at the time it was with Sprint.
And would subpoenas from law enforcement agencies be one of the requests that you would review when you were an analyst?
Correct. That would be one of the formats. So subpoena, search warrant, court order, search warrant having the most available. They would be able to get the most information with the judge's signature. That's kind of how that process works.
What type of documents did you get familiar with as an analyst responding to those legal requests?
So mainly it was call records pertaining to subscriber information, the call detail records, which is the network information that could have other information like cell tower information, billing records. That's the main things that were being asked for, and still to this day. There are some other records that we have as well, but those are the main things. Later on as the progression became more prevalent, text information was being asked for, data, because your phones became user-friendly to be used for search engines, those types of things, for data. So those were often asked for too.
Can you differentiate the call detail records from the other records you've described for the jury?
Sure, absolutely.
How would you describe or differentiate them?
So the call records would show the calls that were taking place. It will have the different numbers. It will also, depend on what type of call record, it will show duration time. It'll have dates.
It seems
Also
RICO
tower
has been
information
a-
if that was asked for.
Oh, it's
That information
T-Mobile.
would be within the record. Also, on the format, when we send the information out, it shows what is being asked for through legal process. Like it gives exact accounts of the information that's being sent out.
Now, in working with Sprint, was it through experience or training that you became familiar with these records and what they contain?
So it was on the job training. And over time, I would be answering questions with whoever was asking for the information. So it took a lot of me trying to get understanding what I was looking at. And then over time, I had to learn the T-Mobile records as well, which was more of a formal training versus how I started at Sprint. It was a different time, back in 2002. But yeah, quite a big difference between 2002 and 2020.
Fair enough. Can you describe for the jury what training you had to get familiar coming from Sprint with T-Mobile records?
So there was a training that happened. It was during COVID. Basically, it was several days of going through the formats of how the records are kept at T-Mobile and the information that T-Mobile carries and how their information is kept in comparison to how the information is kept at Sprint. So there was kind of like a dual training going on where the T-Mobile folks were filling us in on their info and we were doing the same to them with the Sprint information, because two different networks, information being kept, all similar processes and everything, but the content was in different formats and it was kept differently according to time.
Now, you had mentioned subscriber information as documents that you sometimes have to discuss. Can you
Yes.
describe what is contained in Sprint or T-Mobile subscriber information records?
Generally speaking, the subscriber information would contain the account information with the account holder and or subscriber if the subscriber of the phone is different than the account holder. Basically, it would have identifying information if it was not a prepaid subscriber. If it's a postpaid subscriber,
For you who just joined, this is recap from Wednesday. There is no court today, as it wasn't yesterday due to hurricane. So I'm getting caught up with testimony I haven't covered yet.
there's a verification process that takes place. And essentially, in that verification process, they're enabling the person that wants to subscribe to the phone to be able to get billed. And so they do a credit check. Unlike a postpaid subscriber, they'd be paying up front, or a prepaid subscriber, pardon me, they'd be paying up front. And so those are some of the differences, but the elements within the subscriber information could have other information like the type of account, the equipment or the handset number that is associated with the telephone number. It has other identifying information that's network information that also coincides with how the layout is for the subscriber information. But those are some of the things. It would have like activation dates, like when the account was activated, when the number was activated within that account, if it wasn't the only telephone number. There are accounts that have multiple numbers within a specific account, if that makes sense.
When you were just discussing prepaid versus postpaid for subscriber,
Yes.
how is the name created or chosen for prepaid versus post?
So with prepaid, it could be anything. So it could be what that person wants it to read. It's non-verified. So basically there's no verification process that takes place. If I wanted to open a phone and get my own phone, I could say, I want it to say Donald Duck. That could be on there. So that's just the way it is. Because it's non-verified, like postpaid subscriber, there's no credit check being run. They're not showing an ID or anything that has identifying information. There's no requirement. So that's how that works.
You've also mentioned, and we briefly discussed call detail records. Are call detail records kept in the regular course of business with T-Mobile?
Yes, they are. And they're kept for billing purposes.
Is there any other purposes that, well, I'll ask another question. I'll come back to that. Is any of the information include?
Here is one thing about phone records. Now, I haven't heard this testimony, but if he is going to testify about phone records from 2015, that means they would have been kept since 2015 and subpoenaed by the prosecution at that time. Because if I remember correctly, both AT&T and T-Mobile, they only keep their records for 3.5 years. Which means that if the defense wants to dispute or they want a longer period of time of these so-called phone records, they can't get it anymore. which goes to what's it called? Well, untimely. Let's just say that, untimely.
Cell site tower information.
Yes, that's part of the network information. And so the network information would include cell tower information as part of the things that were transpiring within the network prior to the billing process.
And with subscriber information data, with call detail record data, and cell site tower data, what are the various purposes or reasons why T-Mobile keeps those documents in the regular course of business?
So it's mandated that we keep this information by the FCC for a certain amount of time, but we have to be able to bill our customers. So that's why the network information, we keep that. From that, we would be able to ascertain the billable calls for each customer, and then they would be able to send that bill out. Now things are different with unlimited. Oftentimes there's not as much information that's being sent out because of that unlimited plans, but they still generate bills because it's mandated by the FCC. It's also network optimization. They use the information that we have to be able to review if there's any disputes for calls that didn't take place or those types of things. That was more of a thing back when each call was being accounted for, right? You're getting numerous amounts of calls, extra fees, like those types of things. But those are two of the main reasons. And then the subscriber information is kept for a more lengthy period of time because to be able to see in a timeline the subscribers that had different numbers for an amount of time.
Now, before you came testifying here right now, did you and me meet and go over some documents?
Yes, we did.
Did that include any CDs or discs with information on them?
Yes, I reviewed a handful of discs as well as all the information within those discs.
And did you make any markings on those discs after you reviewed them?
I did on the outside envelope.
Now, Your Honor, I'm going to approach the witness with what has been marked as State's Exhibit 515 Yankee through 519 Yankee. And for both 515 through 520, there's a Yankee and a Yankee Alpha corresponding with each number. And so I'm also, Your Honor, approaching the witness with 520 Yankee through 522 Yankee. And for those last three, there is a 520 Yankee Alpha and a Yankee Romeo for those last three.
Okay.
I'm very glad I'm playing this in 1.5 speed. Because normal speed would be so slow.
I've handed the witness those exhibits. When you're done reviewing them, sir, just look up and let me know.
Okay.
What are those that I've...
Everybody's telling me to listen closely. And I saw earlier somebody getting heated over this guy. Okay. I have no clue. Let's just listen.
Ask you to look through.
So these are all requests that were sent out through legal process with Sprint or T-Mobile. So there's several of each, but it's mainly the disc and then subscriber information and some certifications within the packets.
Now, I'll start with 515 Yankee through 518 Yankee. Are those, or 515 Yankee, 516 Yankee, and 517 Yankee, are those three Sprint?
Yes, they're all Sprint correspondence, so the records that were sent out through the Sprint process.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of the subscriber call detail records and cell tower information for those corresponding records?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will tender into evidence 515 Yankee, 515 Yankee Alpha, 516 Yankee, 516 Yankee Alpha, 517 Yankee, and 517 Yankee Alpha.
Those are admitted.
Now, sir, do you also have 518 Yankee, 519 Yankee before you?
Yes, I do.
And do they have a corresponding Alpha that is printed?
Yes,
And are those T-Mobile records?
they are.
Are they a fair and accurate depiction of the subscriber information, call detail records, and corresponding cell site information for those T-Mobile records?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would tender into evidence State's Exhibit 518 Yankee, 518 Yankee Alpha, 519 Yankee, and 519 Yankee Alpha.
You're admitted.
Now, was there also, with the last documents, and by last, I mean 520 Yankee through 522 Yankee, and those three numbers have a corresponding Alpha and Romeo? Do you see those three, sir?
I do.
Did you and me also go through those documents?
Yes, we did.
Do those documents have a business record certification alongside them?
They do.
Your Honor, pursuant to the business record certification, the state would tender State's Exhibit 520 Yankee, 520 Yankee Alpha, 521 Yankee, 521 Yankee Alpha, and 522 Yankee, 522 Yankee Alpha into evidence, and the corresponding business record search for the record are the numbers with Romeo.
All right, those are admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Lower Ducky says, Nick, I worked for Telecom for a long time. So knowing how far behind the US my country is, watching this witness infuriated me to no end. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Thank you.
Now, I want to start with, we're going to go in order, sir. So 515 Yankee, I wanted to talk about those first.
Okay.
And specifically, do you have before you a 515 Yankee Alpha?
Yes,
Can you tell the jury what 515 Yankee Alpha is to begin?
I will. So this is the response pages for the request. Basically has the information for the person that extracted, that was in charge of getting the information through the legal process within my group at Sprint. It has the date of the correspondence, as well as we generate a case number, but it has the person that requested the information, has their information on there as well. And then it begins with basically on page 2, the dates for the information, as well as the number for that specific request.
And Your Honor, I'm going to publish 515 Yankee Alpha for the jury. Now, can you explain for the jury, what is this on the top left when it has a Sprint case number? What does that indicate?
So with every request that is received, a Sprint case number, or T-Mobile has the same type of thing, but a number is generated that correlates with that specific request. And so the case number is 2015, in this case, -032151. So you could look up the information that was sent out. We would have a record of it. That's basically what that is.
And what is the phone number associated with 515 Yankee Alpha?
The phone number is 678-278-5991.
Now, what agency requested these records from Sprint?
It was the Atlanta Police Department.
And who specifically with the Atlanta Police Department requested these records?
It was Ari Bleifeld.
Now,
Who the fuck is Ari Bleifeld? That's a new name, isn't it?
scrolling to page 2 of 515 Yankee Alpha. Who was this account? What person was the bill and account name under?
It was under the name of Kenneth Copeland.
Oh, really?
And what was the
Kenneth.
address associated with this phone record?
878 Oakland Drive, Southwest, Atlanta, Georgia, 30310.
Now, what was the date range for this request?
It was January 1st, 2015 through February 6th of 2015.
That's a reasonable time span.
What date was this account created?
So the account was established on October 29th of 2014.
But we know that
Now,
Woody had more than one phone.
I wanted to ask
so-
you, you turn to the third page. Do you see a line titled equipment?
Yes.
Now, what is that? What does this tell you?
So it basically shows the equipment that's being utilized with the electronic serial number. And so each handset has a ESN or electronic serial number that correlates with that handset. The phone carriers keep track of that information. If there was a change, it would also show if a handset was activated or canceled for whatever reason. I get a new phone, it would show that information.
Now, are you able to tell if this is a pre or post-paid account? And if so, how?
Yes. So with Sprint, in the network access identifier, which is close to the top of the page, where it's just under where it says effective, it has the name of the subscriber, and it'll usually have a numeral next to it. And then it has at sprintpcs.com. When I see that, I know that it's a post-paid subscriber. It's a verified subscriber. If it was prepaid on the Sprint network, it would have something like, oftentimes it would be like Boost Mobile. Boost would show up instead of Sprint PCS, or Virgin Mobile. Those were some of the prepaid components of Sprint, unless it was with a reseller. And so if it was with a reseller, they would have the subscriber information if there was any on a postpaid or a prepaid subscriber rather. So a non-billed subscriber.
Now, sir, did you see, and I'm trying to show this on the screen for you as well, where it has features with a number of asterisks?
Yes.
Right above that, where it says effective 12/15/2014, and then it has expiration. Can you describe for the jury what that means? And
So basically that phone was effective. It was being utilized from December 15th, 2014 through the date searched. So for the entire date range, it was an effective active number, essentially, or phone.
now I'm going to scroll to, and before you see where it has request type in bold, then it has a date range.
Yes,
Is this the date range that corresponds with when these records were requested for?
that's correct.
And it was January 1st through February 6th of 2015.
Yes,
Now, the disc that before you, that's 515 Yankee,
yes,
is that the records that correspond with this subscriber information?
that is correct. It's all the information that was asked for outside of this subscriber information. Basically, the call detail records as well. It can be quite voluminous. So
Now, I'm going to publish for you 515 Yankee.
okay,
You let me know if you can see it on the screen there.
I can see.
Now, is this what you and me reviewed before coming into court?
Yes,
And I wanted to walk through for the jury so they could, what these contain. So this first Word document, what is this document?
so that's the most likely it's the subscriber information, or it's the help aid to interpret the information. That when we send it out, we send out a help aid always with the records.
I meant for it to, give me 1 second. I thought it would publish on your version, but it did not. Can you see it now?
Yes,
What is this document?
this is the help aid or the keys to understanding. And so basically it would break down all the information that is being received as far as the call detail reports.
And if I want to, do you see that this column where it says cell sites?
Yes,
Can you describe for the jury, what does this information and why is it included in these type of requests?
sure. So basically it's highlighting all the different switch information for all the switches that are kept throughout the United States, as well as the identifying information. So it's called a network identifier. All that information is part of the record. So basically this is an overview of all the towers in the United States. But for the specific record that you look at, as far as the call detail record, depending on where that phone's operating, it would have those specific network element IDs for that area. And so with Sprint, you would have a list that coincides with it. And then you would be able to determine the latitude and longitude for that specific tower that works in conjunction with the switch. So basically, a switch conducts the switch to happen from one telephone number to another telephone number. 100 years ago, it was an operator. There was a person that would physically switch a phone to get to its destination. With the network, it's a system. And so it does the switching in the system. That's pretty much how that works. But we give you the overview of all the towers. So you can be able to identify the information, as well as inside of this information, it kind of explains the different nuances of the towers as well and how they're set up.
Now, for example, with the records that T-Mobile, or in this case Sprint at the time, would send back, if a law enforcement agency asked for phone records for 30 days and someone traveled to 10 different states, would the records from that be different or not different in relation to the cell site tower you're talking about for someone who stayed in one state? Their phone stayed in one state.
Right. So anytime there's movement, you're going out of state, the switch would also be typically in the other state as well. So that's kind of how that works. There's switches all throughout the United States. And then for every switch, there's several, could be 100 or more towers that are associated, probably more than 100 with each specific switch, just depending on the population density. And so I'm just going to give you an example. If I was on my phone and I left Georgia and I went north to New York, and I had been using my phone the entire time, getting on calls or whatever while I'm driving through my sync, of course. But anyways, every time you get on a call, it would then have the network information that would correlate with the switch and tower.
Your phone, unless you have that feature turned off, even back then, your phone would actively search for connections. It does not only switch to new towers, whatever's, once you take a call or make a call. It actively searches. Huh.
Or is that are in those specific states that you're traveling through?
Now, I want to go back to what's contained in 515 Yankee. So do you see how there's 3 Excel spreadsheets?
Yes.
I'm going to open these and walk through them with you, starting from top to bottom. Now, when you were just describing the different tower information that would come back from a request, what is this Excel spreadsheet that's contained within 515 Yankee?
So this is the NEID list or the switch information. And basically it's a list on the record. It would have the identifying information, and you would have to refer to this list to be able to plot the latitude and longitude. So with the Sprint records, you have to look up the list, and then you would use the cell ID number to locate the latitude and longitude.
Yeah, as you can see on the non-active, yeah, that is the phone going places. Yeah. Remember Fannie Willis? That she tried to claim in her disqualification hearing that cell tower records are unreliable. It doesn't prove that Mr. Wade was at her place. And yet here we are with cell tower records. And Loa Ducky, our resident phone records expert, says, nonsense! I roam into the USA driving 45 kilometers inside Canada on a highway because we have different towers or switches, as they call them. Yeah. Oh. And he's an expert? Yeah, roam protection, yeah. No, my what you call it? My phone, my subscription, I can travel without the risk of roaming fees. We don't have those anymore in the the European Union. They were outlawed.
For each specific sector of a tower, essentially.
Now, what you see, this Excel is titled NEID 207.
Yes.
What does that mean, and what is after that title of this document?
Sure. So it's the network element ID, and then it's the name of that NEID, which is 207. And then it shows where that switch is, Miami. Typically, it's going to be where that switch is operating. It's the name of the list.
Now I want to show you, I'm going to open up another Excel that was in 515 Yankee, and I want you to describe for the jury. Let me know when this pops up. Do you see that, sir?
I do.
What switch location is this Excel spreadsheet associated with 515 Yankee?
So this one's Atlanta. It's number 176. So it's network element ID 176.
Now, finally, I'm going to publish the last Excel spreadsheet in 515 Yankee and ask you some questions about it.
Okay.
And while I'm pulling that up, you know how on the subscriber sheet it said status A? What does that mean on the different lines of the subscriber information page when it has status A?
It's active. And so if there was a cancellation, it would say status C.
What process goes into deactivating an account from the subscriber's end in these records that you were discussing?
It just depends. So it could be they stopped paying. It could be that they got a new phone and that would show activation cancellation. Or they said they're going to go to another carrier. There's all different variables, right?
Fair enough. Do you know what steps T-Mobile takes to deactivate an account on their end as the provider?
Same type of thing. I mean, those are all instances of how an account or number could get deactivated, right?
Understood. Now I'm going to publish for you the last Excel in 515 Yankee.
Okay.
Do you see this?
Yes.
Now, for purposes of, I'm going to increase the font here for you on this top row.
Okay,
Can you tell the jury in general while I'm doing that what these are?
sure. So these are the columns. And basically it's interpreting the entire record and their column headers, right? The calling number is the number that's doing the calling. You can see at the bottom in green, that's the PTN or personal telephone number. That's the number that the record relates to, right?
Are they showing a bunch of different phone numbers from a specific cell tower that is completely unrelated to this case? How is this not redacted? There are people who might still use these numbers, you twats. How is this not redacted towards the numbers that are important to this case? And Loadaki, our resident cell tower expert, besides the radius of a cell tower is gigantic, and it's essentially a triangular formation, so it's never exact. You're not necessarily beside that tower. You could be beside tower A, but bounce off C. Yeah, it is all about if that specific tower is really busy, you will bounce off the next tower a bit away. And I can't get over they are showing phone numbers that are completely unrelated to this case. What the actual F? When you subpoena in these records, I have never seen an unredacted copy of this information, because you have to remove the people who have nothing to do with the case. Those should never be shown. For fuck's sake.
And then you have the called number and the dialed digits. So the called number is the number that's being called. And then it breaks it down. If there are no dialed digits, that's an indication that it's a text message, because the way that text correlate with.
No, this is not how I agree with Loa Jockey here. It's not even how a telecom company returns records. This is something the prosecution has. They are taking from the actual records and put it in this Excel sheet. Then they went through it with this witness, and now this witness is testifying about records he himself did not create. For fuck's sake.
The records, they don't show the dial digits because it goes through a text message gateway.
So on that note, you see how these first roughly 10 columns are blank, and then you have numbers here in the column I've highlighted. What's the difference between, are these top ones text and this some type of phone call?
Correct. And it will allude to that later. But then you have the mobile roll column, which is identifying inbound would be a call coming in, outbound would be a call going out. There's another nuance that you might see in there that's routed. There's two types of routed calls. And generally, a routed call is going to have an inbound portion and a portion that's routed. It's when the receiver is outside of its normal coverage area and the switch is trying to locate that person or phone, essentially. And so it's being routed by a temporary local dialing number. And it's only on inbound calls, or if a call goes to voicemail. Those are the instances where you'll see routed. And when you see a call that goes to voicemail, it will have like 6245 in parentheses, and the dialed or the called number column is where it would show up.
For a quick example of that, I'm going to move. Did you see the highlighted column to 14?
Yes.
And where it says routed call?
Yes.
Is this what you were just discussing for the jury?
Correct. So those two lines are paired together. Essentially, it's all one transaction, but on the record, it shows two lines.
And do you mean what is listed as 14 and 15?
Yes.
Now, going to after that inbound, outbound, or routed column, can you describe for the jury or walk through? You have start date, end date, duration. Can you describe and walk through these for the jury?
Yes. And so the start date is the date and the time. The time's in military time. So that first transaction is like 1 minute after midnight and 20 seconds. Then it has the duration, as I spoke to earlier. There's no time involved in text, so it's always going to be 0 as far as talk time. And then you have the start date and the end date. The duration would be 0. If it was a call or there was a network, it was attached to the network, it would then have time involved. And then it has the network element ID for those.
Has any ID?
Correct. For those ones in 0, it's showing that number 198 or 194, 198. Those are all text message gateways. They're in that interpretation sheet that we looked at earlier, the key to understanding the information. All those are broken down in there. And then it coincides with the specific repo.
What is the repo number?
Basically the switch list, right?
Understood. Now, I want to ask you something. What, for Sprint records in 2015, what time zone were the records in or kept in?
So for any text message transactions within the Sprint record, it would be in Central Time. And so you would have to add an hour to get to Eastern Time.
What about for phone calls?
Phone calls are switch time. So wherever that switch was, that's where it would relate to.
So if you use the
And Loa Ducky, our resident expert, says they inputted text as 0, which it never is. It shows as SMS and 1. Hi, Casper. Hi, Casper. Welcome. Yeah, there's something really, really strange about these records. Really, really strange. But I haven't heard the defense object yet. Because this is not, as Loa says, I don't know how they got away with falsifying this Excel spreadsheet. I have no idea either. Because this is not the records. I've seen a bunch of trials with records from AT&T and T-Mobile and others. They don't look like this at all. At all. This is probably well, I'm sure it is. The prosecution have took the data and put it in this spreadsheet. And then they went over this with this witness, who should be seriously.
switch in Atlanta, Eastern Time, they would be in Eastern Time.
Correct.
And if you use a switch in Texas, Central Time, it would be Central Time.
That's correct.
And is it based on like in these records, if this cell phone provider, which is attributed to Mr. Copeland, made a call and was in Eastern Time, would all of the calls be in Eastern Time or something else, regardless of who they dialed to?
It would be wherever the phone's being utilized. So it would go back to the switch information.
And if someone that was in, say, California called someone who was in Atlanta, how would the records on the Atlanta call providers come in? What time would come in for that incoming call?
Wherever that person is that's utilizing that number. So you'd have to have the records for the other number, but wherever the physical phone is connected to as far as the switch, that's where that would relate to the records.
So for someone who remained on Eastern Time, regardless of where they're receiving calls, their records would stay in Eastern Time.
Correct.
Now I want to go through just a couple more. Well, what does this last two columns mean that says first cell and last cell?
Sure. So basically the first cell and the last cell breaks down. There's a series of numbers once you go past those zeros. 1 is the sector or side of the tower. And then 7848 on that first cell that we're looking at, it's the second line up, is the cell ID number. And so you would have to go to the list that we looked at earlier, which is 207, NEID list or repo 31. Look on the left-hand column for 7848, that's the cell number, and then look at the first input. That would give the exact information for that tower. And then it finalized on that tower. So it would be the same location for that tower information that you would physically see on that list.
Now, earlier you had mentioned if the duration is 0, it's a text. Is there any significance to this first cell, last cell columns having a 0 versus numbers?
Not for text, no.
So if it's a 0 here, does that mean it's a text?
Yes, but if the phone was off or out of battery and there was calls coming in, it would also show 0.
Understood. Now,
So what you just testified about a few minutes ago, is it correct? What?
would these records that we're walking through, would applications such as FaceTime or WhatsApp or Telegram show up in these documents?
No.
Now, do you have before you 516 Yankee Alpha?
Yes, I do.
Publishing 516 Yankee Alpha for the jury?
Okay, so we hear a lot about,
Now,
okay, but
Who made this request for
what do you mean?
516 Yankee Alpha?
So
We just went through one piece of evidence, but what does it mean? We didn't hear anything about that.
Kevin Leon Pacher, I guess that's how that's pronounced.
Leon
Sounds
Packer?
French. Yeah, or Ian Packer.
And are they with? What agency were they
Who
with
the
when they made the
fuck is
request?
Leon
Atlanta Police
Packer?
Department.
Is that
And
another
what is the
new
phone
name?
number that was requested?
The number is
And more importantly, why isn't it requested by the people the state claims are the case managers or the case that, well, the main investigator? This is so weird.
470-262-2643.
What was the date that these records were provided to the Atlanta Police Department that made the request?
The date that they were provided was, let me look here. It was August 28th of 2015.
Now I want to turn to page 2. What records were, or let me start with this. I'm going to go to the middle of page 2. What is the account name associated with these records?
So the account name is Kelvin Treadwell.
And what was the request? Do you see where it has request type in bold?
Yes.
What all was requested?
So there were several things that were requested. It was subscriber information, call detail records with cell site, and then the per call measurement data.
What was the date range for the call detail records with the cell site for this phone number?
It was January 1st, 2015 through August 26th of 2015.
Now, what date was this account established?
The account was established on February 14th of 2014.
And was this a prepaid or postpaid account?
It was postpaid.
And what page are you on to determine that? Is that page
3?
3? On page 3, is it near where it has equipment?
Correct. Above equipment, it goes back to sprintpcs.com.
Now, was there any changes?
Okay, I checked with Doug, and he says these are normal. Sometimes the state have tried to use exhibits with extra columns, but we get those removed before shown to jury. We also get PDFs so we can verify what's in the Excel is the same as given to state. So apparently this is how it's done in Georgia. Okay. And I trust Doug. I trust Doug.
In this account in terms of cancellations, activations, or anything of that nature?
Yes. So there was a phone change, like the handset changed on
Thank you, Sylvia.
July 29 of 2015. One handset was canceled and another one started.
Now, the records we just walked through that had the duration, the different columns we walked
Yes.
through with the jury, is these records also Sprint?
Yes.
Does the call detail records associated with 516, are they in the same format of what we just walked through with the jury?
Yes.
So the Excel spreadsheet would have the same data columns for this phone number?
Same type of information, just relating to the other number.
Now, I want to turn to 517 Yankee Alpha. Is that also a Sprint record, 517 Yankee Alpha?
Yes, it is.
Publishing 517 Yankee Alpha for the jury. Now, who made this request for the records in 517 Yankee Alpha?
It was a L. Gaither with the Atlanta Police Department.
What was the date that these records were returned to Detective Gaither with Atlanta Police Department?
It was May 28th of 2015.
Now, turning to page 2, what was requested?
I assume so. Seeing Doug's reply to me, yeah, they took the raw data and turned it into an Excel. And in this Excel, text are zeros. And so is also if your battery is dead or your phone is disconnected, which means you really can't tell if it's a text, if your phone's dead, or if you turn it off. All right.
By Detective Gaither with these records.
The cell site information with the call detail records, along with subscriber information for the date range of January 10th, 2015 through May 20th of 2015.
Now, do you see on account details?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jury if this is pre or post-paid account?
So it's a prepaid account. And basically it's a reseller. The reseller name is Red Pocket. Basically, resellers lease lines from the parent company, which in this case is Sprint, and they lease blocks of lines and operate their prepaid business. So if there were any subscriber information, you would have to get it from that specific reseller.
And for these records, were call detail records with the disc that you reviewed for 517 Yankee, were there call detail records that were returned for this cell phone?
Yes.
Ending in 5726, and would it have the same columns as the first two Sprint records we just discussed with the jury?
Absolutely. It's the same information. It's our network information. It's just being, and that's why we were able to respond to the request. But basically, it just is because it's a prepaid and it's operating through the reseller. If there were any subscriber information, they would have that.
Now, let me ask you this. When requests are made, if I requested from January 1st till December 31st of a year, would I ever get more or less records from T-Mobile or Sprint that I requested? And if so, why?
So we're only able to give what is asked for. I'm not saying humans don't make mistakes, but it could happen where more information was given than they were supposed to, but we have to divulge that information if that's the case. And so it could have less depending on if the phone was being utilized. Say the date range was for a year, but they stopped using the phone in September. Then you wouldn't have the rest of the 3 months, right? So that's a thing too. But yeah, we would provide everything that we had for that specific date range.
Now, I want to turn to 518 Yankee and 518 Yankee Alpha. Is that T-Mobile records versus Sprint?
Yes.
And I want to discuss what is the last four of 518 Yankee Alpha?
The telephone number?
Yes, sir.
It is 7604.
And Your Honor, I'm publishing 518 Yankee Alpha for the jury.
Folks, was that part the thing I was supposed to be infuriated about?
Or I should say, what is the billing name for this account?
So the billing name is Trey Brock.
Is it Trez Brock?
Yes.
And what agency or who made this request?
So it was requested by Michael Sprinkel at the Fulton County District Attorney's Office.
When was this requested information provided to Mr. Sprinkel?
October 26th of 2016.
And for these records, what was requested?
Subscriber information and call detail records were requested.
Were cell tower information requested for this number?
Yes, that was included in the cell records.
And do you know if this was a pre or post-paid account?
It's a prepaid.
And what was the date that this account was activated?
The account activation date was April 10th of 2013.
Now, I want to publish 519 Yankee Alpha. Do you have that before you?
Yes.
Is this also T-Mobile records?
Yes, it is.
Now, who made this request for 519 Yankee Alpha?
It was made by the David Razy with the Cobb County Police Department
When were these records provided to Detective Racy with Cobb County?
on January 16th of 2016.
What is the last four of this phone number that Detective Racy requested?
It's 9596.
Now, what is the subscriber name for this particular record?
The subscriber name is Dorothea Greer.
What is under, do you see where it says device details?
Yes.
I'm going to scroll down. What is the MSISDN name indicate?
That's the MISDN or telephone number.
And what is the account details name for this, or subscriber details at the top?
It's Kendra Cohen.
What is the reason, or what's the difference between subscriber details and this device details name?
So this is basically an account that Kendra Cohen opened up, but there was a number that was being associated with the account. You could have multiple telephone numbers under one account, and the name that they gave for that specific telephone number was Dorothea Greer as the person using the number.
Now, what was the date range requested for this 9596 number?
I'd have to look at the actual request. It doesn't show the exact date range in the T-Mobile subscriber info.
Understood. Now, is there any activation or cancellation for this phone number?
So the activation date was February 16th of 2012 for the account. And then the termination date was April 28th of 2015.
What was the disconnect reason?
It doesn't give a reason for the disconnect other than it was canceled.
Do you see under device details the MSISDN disconnect reason column in the middle of the page?
Oh, at the customer request. So the customer requested it.
Now, initially we talked about T-Mobile records. Sprint records, is the call detail records and cell site tower for T-Mobile, is it in the same or different format?
It's a totally different format. With T-Mobile, the cell tower information's on the call detail record. You don't have to go to a separate list to be able to view that information and correlate the two. It's on the record itself. It does give an address. The address is really there for engineering purposes to locate where that tower is located. If you were to plot the information, you would want to use the latitude and longitude. It still has the same identifying information within the record as you would see on the Sprint records as far as the different components of the cell tower.
Now, I'm going to publish the call detail records contained within 519 Yankee.
Okay.
Do you see this on the screen?
Yes.
And can you describe for these columns and what they indicate for the jury? I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you.
I can.
Are the first two the date and time of the calls?
Yeah, it's just in a little bit of different order, but it's the date, time, the time's in military time.
What about the time zone?
So in order to get it to the time zone, these records are kept in universal coordinated time, which mirrors Greenwich Mean Time. You have to do a conversion. And so to get to Eastern time, it would be either -4 hours or -5 hours. It just depends on if it's daylight saving time or standard time. So it would be less in daylight saving time and be -4. It would be more if it was after we turn the clocks back.
Now,
does anybody mind if we go to cross-examination? Press 1 for keep going. Press 2, cross-examination. Okay, listen and wait for cross. Okay. Eternity. All right, let's keep going.
After, you see how there's this duration column?
Yes.
What does it mean if the duration is blank, and can you explain that for the jury?
It just depends. And so they're different records from Sprint. It doesn't necessarily mean the same thing, but it could be that it's a text message, but not always. Basically, you have the duration is the total time that it was connected to the network. You have the call type, which is a mobile outgoing call. So that's definitely a call outgoing, even though it has no duration time.
What does this, do you see call type that's highlighted?
Yes.
What is MOC, MTC? What does that mean?
So I just explained MOC is mobile outgoing call. MTC is mobile terminating call. So outgoing call would be outgoing from that record holder. Terminating would be a call that ended with the record holder. So it terminated at that number. And then it tells you basically in the next column, the directionality. So outgoing is out from the phone. Incoming would be incoming to the phone. If it was a call that went to voicemail, it would have an inbound portion and an outbound portion. It would have two portions, kind of like what I talked about earlier with the Sprint stuff and the routed thing. It would have two portions, and it could say call forwarding, but it's forwarded to the voicemail platform.
And are the next columns delineating the calling number, the dialed number?
Right. And so you have the calling number, the number that was dialed, the called number, and the destination number. Typically, the called number and the destination number is going to be the same thing, but it could have like a 1 in the area code. It would show what was actually dialed in that dialed number column.
What is the IMSI, IMEI
Yeah.
column?
So that's the International Mobile Subscriber Identity that coincides with the target number. It's part of T-Mobile's record keeping that correlates the record with the telephone number, the record holder. And then the IMEI is the International Mobile Equipment ID. That is the serial number essentially for the phone that's operating in tandem with the telephone number.
And what are these completion code? What does, you see how at the top, or I'll highlight it, it has abnormal completion. What does that mean? What could mean?
So it's a call that was on the network, but it wasn't completed. It was not a completed transaction for
What are some
whatever
examples?
for whatever reason.
Understood.
It could have been that the call didn't go through. It was an attempted call, but it didn't complete. And then if it was completed, it shows on there, of course, completed successfully.
Loa asked me to go back.
The International Mobile Subscriber Identity that coincides with the target number. It's part of T-Mobile's record keeping that correlates the record with the telephone number, the record holder. And then the IMEI is the International Mobile Equipment ID. That is the serial number essentially for the phone that's operating in tandem with the telephone number.
And what are these completion code? What does, you see how at the top, or I'll highlight it, it has abnormal completion. What does that mean? What could mean?
So it's a call that was on the network, but it wasn't completed. It was not a completed transaction for
What are some
whatever
examples?
for whatever reason.
Understood.
It could have been that the call didn't go through. It was an attempted call, but it didn't complete. And then if it was completed, it shows on there, of course, completed successfully.
Is the answered column, if the phone call was answered, unanswered?
Correct.
And is the service code, what, without going through all of them, what are some examples of what this service code column indicates?
Yeah. So like 11 is an example like that the calling number was viewable, right?
Connie B gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much. It was gifted to Sarah Schwartzberg, Brooklyn, NYC, Graceful Clutch, Lolita Smiles, and Laura. Congratulations. You now have access to all my members-only content. You also have access to members-only emojis, and you have access to my Discord. And you find my Discord link as members on the community section on my YouTube. All right. Thank you so much, Connie. That is so sweet of you. Everybody say thank you to Connie. Thank you so much.
If it had a 12, it would be restricted. 2A means that it was a call that went to voicemail, essentially. And that would make sense because it wasn't answered, right? And so if it said 2B, it would be a call that goes to voicemail that was not reachable. It went to voicemail as well. And so all these different codes are in the keys to understanding information. So that help aid that is sent out, it's all broken down in there, as well as it would indicate the different columns and the information that's held within the call detail records.
The disconnecting party, the party that ended the call, is that fair?
Correct, the calling party. Right?
Is there anything significant in terms of cell site tower information or call detail records from the service indicator or SMS delivery status column?
No, the specific is the switch. That's giving the switch that handled the transaction. And then it gives the information for that specific switch, the site ID that would go to the tower that is actually conducting the call.
And then you had mentioned, you see how it says switch name and then first LTE site ID?
Correct.
Is the switch name, is that correspond with where the switch that made this phone, the T-Mobile switch that made this phone call? What does that mean?
Right. That's the switch that conducted the call. And then the site ID correlates with the specific tower information.
And then with this column that has azimuth, lat, and long, what is that the azimuth of or the lat long of?
The tower information.
That call used?
Right. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview. Generally speaking, cell towers are 3-sided. So there would be 3 different inputs. You will see that on the Sprint side, but on this record, because it's included within the record, it's just showing the azimuth or the midpoint for that specific sector that the radio frequency bounced off of from that cell tower or antenna. Essentially, your phone just emanates a radio frequency, it bounces off this antenna, that's where it's received. The receiving antenna then shows the latitude and longitude. From that latitude and longitude, you would actually be able to plot where that tower was. It wouldn't give you the exact location of where that handset was, but it's going to give you the tower that received the call.
And is that type of information regularly kept in T-Mobile's course of business?
Yes.
Now, was there also some records that I had discussed, the business record certs?
Yes.
So I wanted to publish 520 Yankee Alpha. Do you have that before you?
Yes.
Apparently, as people in the chat keep saying, we need to watch this.
What is the
because that will make the cross-examination better, and we are not far off.
name, or let me ask you this, what are the last 4 associated with 520 Yankee Alpha? And I'm publishing that for the jury, Your Honor. 520 Yankee Alpha, sir.
It's the number ending in 8008.
Who is the subscriber name associated with this?
The subscriber name is Javaris Bradford.
And what was the account effective date for this?
So the account effective date is May 5th of 2014.
Who made this request?
The requesting party was Daryl Browning, or that was the respondent. Hold on a second. It was David White with the Office of the Fulton County District Attorney.
And when were these records for the 8008 returned to David White with the Fulton County DA's office?
June 13th of 2016.
And what was do you see that above the subscriber details column beneath the provided on date, that sentence where it has the search warrant? What was the date that this request was responding to?
It was in response to a search warrant that was dated on May 16, 2016.
And what is there at the very bottom for device details? What does the MDN effective date or MDN expiration date mean?
So for that specific phone, it was effective October 6, 2015 through December 5th of 2015.
And that phone model, what does that mean? BYOD iPhone?
Bring your own device, iPhone.
Understood. Now, do you have 521 Yankee Alpha before you?
Yes.
Is that T-Mobile or Sprint?
It's Sprint.
I'm publishing 521 Yankee Alpha, Your Honor. Who requested, or let me ask you this, what are the last 4 of 521 Yankee Sprint records for that cell phone?
The numbers, last 4 is 3145.
And who requested these Sprint cell phone records?
David White with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office.
What was the date of David White's request?
When did we send it out?
Correct.
It was June 25th of 2016.
And what is the name associated with this account?
The subscriber name is Monica Cobb.
And what was the date range for this request?
The date range was from January 1st, 2015 through January 31st of 2015.
When was this account established date?
The account, give me one second, was established on December 19 of 2003.
And was this prepaid or postpaid?
Give me one second. It was a postpaid subscriber, a billed subscriber.
And was call detail records with cell site requested?
Yes.
Was call detail records with cell site received by the requesting party, David White?
Yes.
Now, would these call detail records and cell site correspond with the T-Mobile columns that we walked through?
Sprint?
Or sorry, my apologies. Yes, the first columns we walked through, the first XL was Sprint.
Correct. They would have the same information just for a different telephone number. And so it would be in the same format as the other Sprint records that we looked at earlier.
Now, you also have before you 522 Yankee Alpha.
Yes.
Is that T-Mobile or Sprint?
It is T-Mobile.
I'm going to publish 522 Yankee Alpha for the jury, Your Honor.
So this is just billing records, more or less, and some stuff about, all right, they pinged out of this cell tower, sort of.
Now, who made, or what are the last four of this cell phone number requested?
The last four are 3904.
Who made this request?
The request was David White was the requester with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office.
When did the records get returned to David White?
It would have been,
So when were they provided, I should ask?
on June 13th of 2016.
Now, what was the subscriber name?
The subscriber name was Kendra Cohen, was the actual account holder. And the subscriber name was Young Money.
Is there any activation or cancellation with this account?
Give me 1 second.
Let me ask this, when was the account effective date?
So the account effective date was December 26th of 2014. And then the account expired or expiration date was April 24th of 2015.
And what was the date range requested for these records?
It's not on this request. It would have been in the body of the search warrant.
With the call detail records associated with this, if we looked at the first row and the last row, would that tell us the date range of?
It would give you an approximation, right?
Publishing, Your Honor, 522 Yankee, the call detail records. Now, sir, can you see what the date is for the first call in these records?
It's January 5th of 2015.
Okay. And what is the date in column 614 to 615?
January 15th of 2015.
One brief moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I briefly approach with member of defense?
Okay. Please.
Or T-Mobile record. Now, earlier I'd asked you about
Just a little bit more.
Sprint or T-Mobile records not tracking different applications in these call detail records from Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, something like that. Why are they not captured in these records?
That's a form of data. And so this is the network information. If data information was asked for, it could show up in those types of records. But with the actual call detail records and cell site information, there would be no data involved in that.
And from 2015 until 2024 today, has there been any change in the towers that T-Mobile, or what once was Sprint, had? Have they increased, decreased, stayed the same in terms of towers in the network?
So the network's stronger now because we essentially migrated all the Sprint information into T-Mobile. There's not really much more I can say about that other than it's a stronger network now than it was when both companies were operating on their own.
Understood. And when we had discussed subscriber information, is there any reason that it says basic subscriber information? Is there any other type of records associated with subscriber information, or why is it referred to that way?
Yeah, so we can only give what is asked for. And so several years ago, Sprint had made a change that we would only give out the expanded subscriber information if it was asked for through legal process. And expanded versus basic is it would be the account details that has the social security number involved. Keeping that type of information in-house is a big deal. We don't want those types of things going out. And so we would only send that information if it was asked for. And so that would be the difference. So basically, if a request came in and it was basic, it wouldn't be the expanded subscriber information. So it wouldn't include the date of birth, the social security number. Like those would be things that weren't sent out.
One brief moment, Your Honor. Thank you, sir. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right, defense questions for this witness?
Oh. Imagine if I had done this live. Oh God, I would have been bored out of my skull. I played this in 1.5 speed, folks. Now, you guys promised me it would get interesting on cross. So I hope it is. I really, really hope it is. And I just got raided by Mo. Hey, Mo Raiders. And yeah. Casper loves this boring stuff. He's a former math teacher. All right, Mo raid. And okay, I was planning on raiding Mo later because we have roughly 20 minutes. Now I need to find somebody else. Hey, folks, you are just about to hit. You got to the interesting part, which is the cross-examination of Rico from T-Mobile. Going down to 1.25 speed here.
Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yes.
Do you ever have you ever encountered your records showing a certain duration for a call, and then the call goes to a different provider's record? So it's calling from one phone, your company, to another company. You understand what I'm asking you so far?
Yes.
And they have different times for duration. Can you explain that to the jury, if you come across that?
So I don't really compare other carriers. There could be a slight variation, but I just mainly look at the records for my specific company, right? But there could be some type of maybe a minimal amount of time that's different.
What would be minimal? And we have an example.
Seconds. I don't know.
We're talking 10, 15, 20 seconds difference, or you're talking 2 seconds difference?
Like I said, I don't work for another carrier. I've worked for these two. And when you're comparing phone calls, there could be some type of network reception. So it could be different depending on, you're talking about 2 different networks correlating with 2 different transactions, but it's the same, right? And so the way one carrier keeps their information could be slightly different than the other carrier. So I can't tell you why.
Okay. The azimuth, it's AZIMUTH, I believe.
Correct.
Can you explain what that is to the jury?
I can. So the azimuth is the midpoint for the sector. Generally speaking, cell towers have 3 sectors, and they would show the directionality of where the radio frequency was bouncing off of that specific sector. So basically the azimuth is the middle part of the sector. I kind of look at it like this. Like if you looked at a clock, 12 is 0 and 360, right? On a compass. And so 120 would be at 4 o'clock. If 120 degrees was that sector, the midpoint would be 60. So that would be the azimuth. That's just one example.
How do you know in these records that you have just talked about, how do you know whether there's 3 sectors in these records that the jurors are about to see and get explained?
So on the Sprint records, they're on basically the list to interpret the information. It's all in there.
the T-Mobile records just show the azimuth for that specific tower. So they're two different things, right? T-Mobile has it on the record. Sprint shows all the sectors on the key that coincides with the records.
Okay.
So the engineering aspects, that would be, you'd have to have the actual master list to see how that, for T-Mobile, how that orientation was, if it was multiple sectors or an omni antenna, which would be one, right? So it doesn't discount what actually transpired because it shows on the record for T-Mobile.
And then my last series of questions on that clock example you just gave, with the 1, the 4, I don't know if you said, but the 8 o'clock would be the next one. 3 sectors. Is that fair to say?
If that's how that tower was oriented.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Explain that to the jury, because
Yeah.
it can rotate depending upon how the tower is built. Is that all true?
Right. So the sectors are, once they're made, they can be changed, but generally you're going to have one sector covering an area that's approximately 120 degrees. All 3 of them would make up 360 degrees, which would be the 0 and the 12, right? And so they're oriented differently depending on, I'm not an engineer. I just know this from everything that I've done over the years with these records, right? Over 20 years of working with these. But they're orientated for reception, population density, right? The way that they're set up is all predicated by that azimuth. And so that gives the midpoint for each one of those sectors. The records are only going to show the one azimuth for that specific tower that was the radio frequency was bouncing off of.
How do we know the rotation of that specific cell tower from these records without going out to the actual tower on the actual date?
Like I said, that's giving you the midpoint for the one specific tower on the T-Mobile records. On the Sprint records, it will show all of them.
Right, but the rotation, how the cell tower
It's not
itself-
rotating, it's staying in one position.
Understood, but when it's built, it could be different. For tower 1, we can have a perfect clock with the first, I'll call it alpha.
That's right.
Well, let me just finish the question. Alpha between 0 and 4 o'clock, or 12 and 4 o'clock. Beta would be 4 to 8. Gamma would be 8 to 12. But on the
Generally speaking, that's how it'd be set up.
but on the next tower, it may be, and I'm making this up, 2 o'clock
That's right.
till 6 o'clock. I think I did that right. Would be the alpha, and et cetera. True.
That could happen.
Okay.
It's still going to be on the record.
Okay. Perfect.
But basically, you really can't tell unless the shown charts are showing it.
That's all. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other defense questions for this witness? No one? Any redirect?
Very briefly, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so he basically said, we don't know. Because T-Mobile and Sprint are different. So we really can't tell. We have a theory about where the midpoint is, but we really can't tell. That's interesting. How the fuck can this be admitted as evidence if not even the guys from T-Mobile and Sprint can tell? So Phony Willis was correct. Phone tower records are not reliable. Oh wow. Oh wow. All right, redirect.
On cross, when you were asked questions about the azimuth and the data in these records.
Correct.
With the records from either Sprint or T-Mobile that we discussed, is the data needed to plot is the location of the tower information contained in these call detail records with cell site information that we have?
Yes, within both carriers' records, right? Both Sprint and T-Mobile's information. The information is revealed for the latitude and longitude along with the azimuth for every pertinent call that was a
Yeah, but that doesn't tell the actual position. It only tells, okay, here is the longitude and latitude in theory. It doesn't actually show, and we went through this in the Karen Reed case about how they had to, not only, they couldn't use cell towers, they had to use the car data and GPS data to even come close to something accurate. And it still was unreliable. And using just cell towers, and yeah, it's too broad. If you are in a huge city like Atlanta, you have many different cell towers in relatively tiny areas. Now, they still will overlap like crazy. And the phone can jump in between different towers during a call, which means the positioning will be off all the time. So yes, Bonnie Willis is correct. It is unreliable, but they still use it in court.
attached to the network.
With the records that were received back? or
That's
provided?
correct. That's correct.
One brief moment, Your Honor.
Yes. They are talking about cell phone call pings from specific towers.
And is the latitude and longitude of the tower location contained in these records for either Sprint or T-Mobile?
Yes. So the latitude and longitude is there. You would have to use some type of mapping software to be able to see it on a map, but it does give the exact location of where each tower is located. As I spoke to earlier, you don't want to use the
tower
address
is
that's
not
there
where
on the
the
address
phone
line,
actually is.
because that could be an address that is utilized to locate the tower. It could be in a farmer's backyard. It could be anywhere, right? And so the lat and long is what you would need to use, as well as the azimuth to get the directionality, and then you would be able to see an estimation of where the radio frequency was bouncing off of, but it would give you the exact location of the tower.
Thank you, sir. No
You're
further
welcome.
questions, Your Honor.
Anything else, Mr. Steele, based on that? All right, thank you for your time. You are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And I think, given the time we're at now, and I'm sure people are wondering how hard it's raining outside, since we're apparently potentially getting only category 1 right now, but hurricane may be heading in our direction. We'll go ahead and break for this evening. And I have gotten word in the last little bit that a determination has been made to close the courthouse tomorrow. So we will not be in trial tomorrow. And I don't have any word for Friday yet. We'll get that information to you.
And we now know it was all closed both Thursday and Friday. So, but that means we are all caught up on my channel with this trial. Monday, I will start late. I will probably start late all next week because of caseload. But so I will be starting around 5 p.m. Just about when the trial day stops for the day. I will go online streaming this with a recap, so that 8 hour we can condense down to, I don't know how many hours. So what I will do is I'm going to redirect you to, and sorry, I will redirect you to Laid Back Law, who has a panel show. And that would get you warmed up to my panel show today at 6 p.m. in 6 hours. We will have a panel show about this week in the young Thug RICO trial. But until then, thank you. Thank you all for allowing me to do this. Thank you for the generous donations. Thank you for allowing me to trying to transcribe this or translate this trial to you guys. And thank you for helping me doing that. And from me and Mr. Jingles, hug your family. Unless your family is crap, then screw them and give your love to the people who deserve it. And I will see you in 6 hours. Okay. Bye-bye.
Adrian in the courthouse feeling fire. Every word she utters smells like a tire. Her arguments hit like a flat balloon. Manure tornado in the courtroom noon. Her voice a chainsaw cutting through the air. But the logic's missing, nothing's really there. Whirling out of circles, losing grip. Every point she makes is just a slip. Another tornado spreading wide. All her arguments turn to hide. Courtroom laughter when she's done. Prosecutor Adrian ain't one.